Good afternoon. Felt official. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us at this afternoon's Northern New Mexico CAB Citizens Advisory Board meeting. It is my pleasure to welcome you all. My name is Elizabeth Gilbertson. I go by Ellie Gilbertson. I am the temporarily acting deputy designated federal official in the absence of Lee Bishop. But before we get started, I did want to say a few words about the heat that we are all experiencing locally. These are record-breaking temperatures, and a lot of our infrastructure locally is not necessarily set up to handle this situation. I know my house personally does not have air conditioning, and I know many of you are in a similar situation. I encourage everybody on this call and everybody present to please be cognizant of the physical impacts of this heat, both to your body as well as to maybe your home structure. Certain materials weaken under intense thermal stress, so just be cognizant of that. With that, many of you are associated with a number of the emergency notifications that go out. Many of you are not. For everybody's awareness, the area is experiencing power disruptions as a function of this heat, most certainly, as everybody is running their air conditioners. They are currently experiencing outages in Española, Chimayo, and San Pedro. We are in that area here in today's CAB, so for those of you joining us online, if we cut out, my sincere apologies. We'll do everything in our power to reconnect, but please know it is likely associated with this situation. So with that, I would like to turn the meeting over to Ms. Elena to get us started. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? Great. Can you hear me online? You can put a thumbs up. Let's see. Okay, thank you. Gotcha. Okay, well, welcome everyone to the July 19th, 2023 meeting of the Northern New Mexico Citizens Advisory Board here at the Cities of Gold Hotel. And thank you to the Pueblo of Pojoaque for hosting us here. Welcome to Ellie Gilbertson, our interim DDFO. And most importantly, welcome to you, the public. We, the CAB, are comprised of citizens of New Mexico from different backgrounds with different expertise. And we invite you, the public, to join us and to nominate yourself or someone you know to become a member of the CAB. Essentially, you, as a New Mexican, are a subject matter expert. We provide guidance and recommendations to the Department of Energy Office of Environmental Management on legacy waste, that is waste that was generated at Los Alamos National Laboratory dating from July 1999 back to the beginning of the lab, that includes Cold War and Manhattan-era waste that currently resides at LANL. We are being recorded, and our meeting will be posted to YouTube. And I say this all the time, and I'm going to say it again. If we go viral, please let it be for a good reason. Please note that photographs will be taken during the meeting. I am your vice chair today, filling in for our chair, Cheryl Annette City, who is on travel and sends her regards and wishes she could join us, but she had some other pressing matters to take care of. Now, can we go around the room and introduce our CAB members? And I will start with Beverly. Push the button.
There you go.
I'm Beverly Martin. I worked in Los Alamos for 25 years and retired in 2012, and I currently live in Santa Fe.
I'm Jim Murphy. I live in Santa Fe County, retired. Been on the CAB for officially about 1.5 years now.
Marty Hewlett, Taos, New Mexico, and I'm at the University of New Mexico at Taos campus.
I'm Patricio Pacheco, Nambe, New Mexico, currently the City of Santa Fe Water Resources Conservation Specialist.
My name's Roger Life. I'm Excuse me, I got a frog. I'm retired fire department in Los Alamos. Spent a few years working at the lab before I went to the Los Alamos County Fire Department. I'm a CAB member representing the Espanola area.
I'm Steve McLaughlin, a semi-retired attorney, businessman, and real estate developer. I live in Santa Fe.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Laurent, a resident of Los Alamos County and also the Deputy County Manager for Los Alamos County.
I'm Mark Hayden, General Counsel for the Office of Superintendent of Insurance, and I've been with the state for 10 years. I live in Santa Fe. Thanks.
Thank you. And now we'll move to our members online. I see Manny. Oh,
He's on mute.
we can't hear you, Manny. You're muted right now.
How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Manny Las Bronze. I'm retired Lionel and I reside in Santa Fe County.
Thank you, Manny. Let's move to Joseph. Jose. There he is.
Buenos días de los Dios. My name is Joseph Villegas, and I'm a member of CAB, and I represent the Santa Fe County community in that particular area. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. And let's see, Melissa?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I got my speaker going. Hi, I'm Melissa Casillas. I'm from Taos.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that's all for CAB members. If we've missed a CAB member, you're online because I can't see all the names right now, but we are looking. Please go ahead and introduce yourself. If not, then we'll move on. Are there any members of the public who would like to introduce themselves, whether in the room or online? And just feel free to unmute yourself. Okay.
Go ahead and introduce her.
Oh, well, we're waiting for more public introductions. I'd like to note that Susan Coleman, the chair of the Hanford CAB, is joining us online. So welcome, Susan. We're glad to have you here again.
Okay, let's move on.
Elena,
Yes?
this is Neelam Dewan. Me and Rick would be coming. We'll be a little late. We haven't left Santa Fe yet.
Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate that, Neelam, and it'll be good to see you.
All right.
Be careful driving.
Thanks.
So members, DOE Environmental Management 1 Senior Advisor White plans to join us later this afternoon. And should I introduce anyone else? And we have members of our elected officials that are online. Welcome, it's good to see you.
Yes. Go ahead. Ann Quintana.
Okay. I see Annie Quintana Edens, who is representing Representative Gabriel Vasquez. Welcome, Annie.
You need to speak up.
Now, as far as I can see, those are all our introductions. Brad, did you want to introduce yourself as well?
Good afternoon. I'm Brad Smith. I'm showing as Program Manager Engineering Nuclear Safety, and I have been given a promotion, so I'm now President and General Manager for N3B, taking Kim Liebeck's place. Nice to see everybody.
Welcome, Brad. Thank you for being here. Okay, members, you have your meeting packet in front of you. Online members, you should have received a meeting packet online. So we're going to go through the agenda. We've done our welcome and introductions. We're doing our overview and approval of the agenda, and then we will go to the approval of minutes. At 1:10, we will go to old business, which we are already running a little behind. And we'll have our updates from the chair and vice chair, updates from the subcommittee chairs, and then a report from our nominating committee, because today we will have our elections. Do we have a quorum?
Yes.
And we have a quorum. And then at 1:30, we'll move on to new business. Those will be the candidate statements, and then the elections of officers for fiscal year 2024. At 2 p.m., we will be discussing, we'll have a discussion regarding draft recommendation on material disposal area H. Right now, we just have an outline as the Risk Evaluation and Management Subcommittee is working on that and taking your comments and synthesizing those into a draft recommendation. 2:45, we plan to have a break. 3 o'clock, hopefully, because they're on travel right now, we'll have an update from Michael Michelanis, our EMLA Field Manager. And then 3:30, update and look ahead from N3B with Brad Smith. And then 3:50, an update from NMED, where we're waiting for Neelam and Rick. Hopefully they can join us. And 4:15, we'll have a hard stop for public comment. And 4:30, we'll go through comments from board members and, of course, adjourn by 5. We'll try to get you out of here on time.
And you will have an opportunity to
And then,
ask Ike.
and then during our, hang on, yeah, during that time for board comments, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions from Ike White
Actually, it's under Michael's
under Michael's
presentation.
presentation. You will have an opportunity to speak to Ike White. So please take a moment to review the agenda, and then if there are any modifications to the agenda that you would suggest, and when you do, or if you make a motion to approve, please state your name on when you make a motion to approve, and state your name if you second.
Mark Hayden, motion to accept the agenda as drafted.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, approved. Agenda is approved. Now let's move on to the minutes. Has everyone had a time to review the minutes from the May 17th meeting? Please take a moment to review that. And same procedure, state your name before you make a motion or a comment. Thank you. That way the people online know who's speaking if they don't have their video on.
Jim Murphy, a motion to approve the minutes of the May 17th meeting.
Mark Hayden, second.
In favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Thank you all. Let's move on to old business. Update from the chair and vice chair. Sherilyn sends her regards. She wishes she could join us today. As for me, my activities as vice chair on June 21st, several members of the CAB and I attended the tour of some of the legacy cleanup sites at Lannel. Members of the CAB and I attended the DOE 435.1 Radioactive Waste Management Overview on June 29th. When I receive those slides, as promised, I will forward those to the rest of the CAB. They were very interesting, and I think they would be helpful for your edification. It was an excellent program that all of us can benefit from and knowing more about. If anyone would like to receive information from the performance and risk assessment community or practice group distribution list that sends out information on similar meetings and presentations, then send your request to Karen Skubal, and I will get you that email address. Members of the Public Outreach and REM, Risk Evaluation and Management, also known as REM, Subcommittee and I attended the Technical Working Group meeting on Wednesday, July 12th, regarding surface water and stormwater monitoring programs as presented by Amanda White. Personally, as Vice Chair, I have done outreach to several members of the public about becoming members of the CAB and the office of some elected officials about attending our meetings, so welcome Gabe Bosque's office. Now, do we have an update from the Consent Order Subcommittee? Mark?
Yes, thank you. Mark Hayden, Chair of the Consent Order Subcommittee. Last time we met, we talked a little bit more about our work order for this year. And as particularly, we were anxious to see some changes with the consent order. We understand it's under litigation with the New Mexico Environment Department, And when that comes to fruition, I've been told that we'll have an opportunity to see that. We will have many recommendations for changes to the consent order if they're not already in there, something we've been working on for the last several years. And lastly, we want to expand the jurisdiction of the CAB. We feel that the transuranic waste that goes from Los Alamos all the way down to WIP, some 300 some miles, is not really part of our jurisdiction at the current time. When I met in DC with all the other CABs, all 7, they have jurisdiction throughout their entire state. We're the only one with 3 sites that have only jurisdiction for this area, from Santa Fe to Los Alamos. And then I'll turn it over to Jim if I missed anything. Thank you, Jim.
Mark, you never miss anything. Let me add, as we had that discussion last week with the management committee, couple, 3 things that are interesting to me right now. One is, we asked Eric to come in, if you recall, to the meeting in May, and I thought gave a tremendous presentation on the very complex thing that we're talking about right now. And I thought he did a great job, and I think the slides we have show it. One of the interesting things about that is that the what are we working on? This is where my mind goes. Anyway, what our committee is about was put together in 2006. And so whatever happens with the litigation, I think it's going to be really important, and I think we're going to have a lot of work to do after that becomes fruitable, if I can use that term. Secondly, I want to back up what Mark has to say. If we think about now all the notoriety that we're getting, or Oppenheimer's getting, and Lanel is getting with the movies and everything else that's coming out today, I think it points out how important our jurisdiction is. We are right in the seat of all the activity that happened during World War II, and I think to expand now this CAB's operation would be a great thing for us to think seriously about. So I'm behind that recommendation, so thank you.
I'm not on, okay. Thank you, Mark and Jim. Before I move on to the public outreach, I'd like to welcome Matt Miller from U.S. Representative Teresa Ledger Fernandez's office. Welcome, Matt. Also, please mute your phones here in the room and online so we don't get feedback. I appreciate that. Now let's move on to the update from the Public Outreach Subcommittee. The Public Outreach Subcommittee has met with the web design team. The team has sent the subcommittee a beta site so that we may see how the site may function and what features it can have. I believe I sent that out on June 27th for your review and input as well. We've received some input, so thank you to those of you who have sent us your information. I can resend that link to you if you like. Please note that the color, theme, images, and placeholder paragraphs will contain the correct information when we go live, so disregard some of that. It's just what we would like to see on our website and how it functions. In the meantime, please re-review the site and send your comments to Bridget as soon as possible. And now, Michael may have more information on that later. So I will give the update from the Risk Evaluation and Management Subcommittee. We met during the last combined subcommittee meeting, and from there, with consensus from the CAB, the draft recommendation regarding materials disposal area H is now under the REM subcommittee's purview, and we are in the drafting phase, of which I will go into more detail during the discussion at 2 p.m. So now let's turn this over to the report from the nominating committee, who is comprised of Patricio, Jim, and Mark. And I believe Patricio will be giving the report. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, everybody. The nomination committee, comprised of Mark, Jim, and I, reached out to the fellow members by email, phone, and majority of the communication was done in person. The following nominations are for the chair, we got Elena and Mark. And the following nominations are for vice chair. We got myself, Jim, and Mark as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricio, and thank you, team, for doing that. That's not an easy task. I've been on that subcommittee twice. So congratulations. You did it. So,
Are there any
are there,
nominations from the?
oh, are there any,
Nominations from the floor?
are there any other nominations now from the floor or members online? Seeing none, okay, we will move on to new business.
Well, we need to get the
Oh.
ballots out.
Hang on, I'm stampeding right on to new business. So Bridget will hand out the ballots, they're paper ballots. Bridget has emailed the ballots to our members online. And you fill those out at your leisure during the meeting, and they will be collected while we proceed with the meeting, and then Manise will give the report at the end. So take one and pass it down. And there is also a write-in, I believe a section for a write-in. Thank you. Yes, for an other. All right, thank you, members, and Bridget is collecting and tallying the votes now. So let's move on to new business. That is the candidate statement and elections of chair and vice chair for fiscal year 2024. The candidate statements are in the packet, and if you so wish, please go ahead with your statement. Who should we start with? Let's start with Patricio. Would you like to read your statement? It is on the, if you are in the room, it is on the, which color? You're on the green.
Great.
Please go ahead.
Great, thank you. Just put together a brief statement on for the candidacy here. We got 4 questions, and I put together just 4 basic answers for those questions. So first question is, what encourages you to run for office? So, I answered by saying, I'm encouraged to help serve the people of my community. The city and the surrounding communities are full of rich history and culture whom are facing serious challenges and questions on environmental cleanup and arising questions that require some serious solutions. 2, what are the goals that you have for the next fiscal year? I would like to see more communication and engagement from the public. I would also like to help encourage more open communication between the CAB, N3B, and EMLA to the people of interest. Why do you feel you are best suited to lead the CAB during the next fiscal year? Given my water and soil environmental background, I feel like I am a good asset to the seat. and board who has some, but not all, knowledge of the environmental aspects in and around our community. How can the CAB and EMLA and N3B, as they strive to clean up the legacy waste and LANL, the New Mexico CAB can be a stepping stone for EMLA and N3B to get to the public more involved and educate on the hard work that the environmental cleanup that has and will continue to make strides on. How can the CAB best involve the public? So I feel like the CAB can better involve the public by making our meetings more known, get advertisement into our website and social media, possibly flyers, that the people know we're meeting and having some lively discussion that they can partake on. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Patricio. That was excellent. Jim, would you like to go next? Sure. I think you're on the
There we go.
purple.
Thank you. I'm purple in your packet. And there's more words here in this than I want to share with you, so I'll just hit the high spots. First of all, let me say that it's been really great to work with Mark and Patricio on the nominating committee. Every time we get involved in this kind of stuff, you learn new things about new people. So it's been a great experience. What I said here basically is I answered an ad in the newspaper. My wife was encouraging me to get more involved in things, and so the ad came out in the newspaper. This was about 2.5 years ago. And I answered the ad, and Manish and I got together, and it's been a great experience ever since. What I am learning about what's gone on the Hill, and what's going on with the CAB, and what's going on with all the efforts that are being put together by now N3B and all the people who are working seriously to handle the waste and clean up the whole area is an amazing experience. So I'm looking forward to continuing that experience and learning more and more, and hopefully I can bring something back to the party. My work life has been basically in the consulting business in the second half of my life, and in that regard, I've worked in a lot of organizational activities on organizational development. And what I would hope to bring to this group more of is that experience. I believe so strongly in the idea of continuous improvement. And I hope that what we can continue to do is make this organization run a little more smoothly and a little better. The incredible experience we have sitting around this table, I think we got to figure out a way to call on you all more as the next couple of years go by. We are living in a strange time in our lives, and I think that we have an opportunity for people sitting here who can add to our lives. The last thing I'll say, and you can read this if you want, but the last thing I'll say is two things. One, I am concerned about what I call the other half of our public. A lot of the work that we develop here, a lot of the work that goes on the Hill, I think reaches more than I'd like to see, reaches the technical side of people's brains. And I think we have the other half of the public to be concerned about. It's the people who hopefully are watching here, and I think we've done a great job so far of bringing the public into these sessions. But how we can reach the people on the street who don't have an opportunity to sit here, who don't have an opportunity to do the site visits, is a real worthy goal. And so I hope we can continue to do more of that, and I hope I can contribute to that also. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for your thoughts about moving us forward. Next, Mark, you are in the white sheet, for those of you.
I am on the white sheets.
You're on the white sheet. No, I meant the white paper.
The white paper.
I apologize. Okay. That was, I'm so sorry.
So a little bit about me. My work background, my education includes both engineering and law. Organized and I'm driven, that's my brand. I've been on the CAB 3 years. My term ends next November. I like to break down silos. I've done that at work. I've done that in my community. In fact, as the president of the Homeowners Association, I've talked to people that have never been talked to before and found a lot of expertise in our own backyard on things that we can do and do better. I'm also in the Aldea Outdoor Committee, which I started when I was tracking birds and then eventually trying to get the parks in shape for more birds, and then the Homeowners Association to make sure that the committees were getting what they wanted. So one thing led to another. I've also drafted a number of CAB recommendations over the years. I've been an attorney for 34 years in both private practice and litigation, last 10 years in the state. I'm currently general counsel, and I bring a lot of energy to everywhere I go, and hopefully that rubs off. I think some of you may have felt it. I also think that things like the strategic planning committee that I'm on in the community, for 25 years, we've never really developed the commercial area. And so I actually reached out to those folks, it's the different homeowners, and said, what can we do together to make a difference? And started visioning what that might look like. And then later, we make it implement. But getting the vision, which is what I'm good at, I'm on, we also just created a vision statement, a mission statement, and values for our community. Those are important things to guide you, but then you need the energy to follow up, and I've got that too. So I've met a lot of people, started a lot of conversations. I get things done. Some of the things I like to do here, simplification of wording. That's a theme that I got from Washington, D.C., working with the other CABs. They all want simple wording. They want charts to show the cleanup progress. Public awareness, and I've expanded on saying that if our jurisdiction includes more than just this area, we can then include others and include those in the outreach program that we have and reach more public. Follow up on recommendations. That was one of the things I brought back from DC as well, and this committee was presented with one of those recommendations. And then recommending the consent order rewrite, I think, is very important because there's a lot of things that are lacking in the consent order that need to be changed. Gantt charts are something I've been after for the last 3 years in a row, and other CABs use that, so maybe I can help EMLA and N3B creating charts, because that's what others do. And I think I reach out to everybody. I want to be more inclusive. I want to start, if you will, putting people in place for the following election year and put together a succession plan, because I think it starts when you're in office, when you're doing what you're doing, and help other people get to where you are to replace you when that time comes. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, you do bring a lot of energy. I appreciate it. You do. I don't know. Should I read my candidate statement, or what would you like? You should. Oh, the whole thing? So I didn't answer any questions. I just wanted to be heartfelt, because this is my last year on the CAB. It's been my pleasure to serve for the last 5 years. And so my term will be up sometime next year. So in that time, we've seen a lot of change with the CAB, with different members coming and going. And Roger and I started at the same time. He started a couple months before I did. So I'm just so appreciative of all the people that I've met from so many different communities, and your expertise has really informed me and helped me to think about things in a different way. And that way we can, getting that knowledge from our community members makes us a stronger group, and it also makes for stronger recommendations. It's not just the technical side, as Jim said. It is also what you, as the risk, we are all part of a risk community. You are the community risk side, you are the risk managers, and you bring that expertise so that we become stronger together. And that is also important, is equity, so that we have that access, so that the public can join us. We're pushing hard to bring the public back, especially after COVID. We did continue to have some meetings, but it wasn't the same. But I think we've really hit a good point with the hybrid meetings. I know it's made me a more effective member because I have that access, and that is how equity works. So I will read this, though. I hope to help the CAB continue to focus on equity, and we can take another look at the bylaws to ensure we are following the Justice 40 initiative, not only because it is what DOE and EMLA would like from us with their strategic planning, but because it is always the right thing to do, and I know a lot of you always want to do the right thing by bringing in the public and informing them and asking questions for them. It is my hope that we continue to aid EMLA with its Justice 40 mission and its continuing efforts to reach the public, that we continue to synthesize our members' and communities' wants and needs into comprehensive and realistic recommendations that guide and aid not only EMLA, but are also of merit and service to New Mexico's regulatory agencies and of utmost importance to the people of New Mexico to whom we serve. We are here to operate in fairness and transparency for the sake of our communities, and I hope that we continue to work together to ensure that the CAB has what it needs in terms of understanding its role and how we may utilize our role to its utmost effectiveness, and that our recommendations be proactive and protective. And that is my statement. Thank you. Any questions? Maybe we should have done those statements before the... Would you like to change your mind? No. Any questions or comments? Is there a discussion on going forward, what we'd like to see with the CAB? We'll have more opportunity this afternoon, but we've brought up a lot of things, and a lot of them are heartfelt, and I know we come from a place of service. Any discussion, comments from anybody?
I want to make a comment.
Jim?
I want to ask Mark how come he's the only one that has picture published in the comments or in our candidate statements.
Truth be told, I had a bio not too long ago and a picture, so I figured I had it at the ready, might as well send it.
Anne? Thank you, Jim.
I just want to say that I just really appreciate all your willingness to put your, put the extra effort in, and I know how much work it takes and how much I feel I rely on a lot of the work you all do, so thank you.
Thank you, Anne. I'm sorry, was it somebody? Oh, Joseph, please, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for the good, the statements from each one of you. I appreciate each one of you for the work that you have done already for the CAB. And I really have a lot of faith in all your abilities and working as a familia for the northern part of our state and the work that you guys do. So gracias. Thank you so much for being who you are and taking the time to take care of us.
Thank you, Joseph. That's beautifully put. Thank you. Anyone else, any of our members online? Go ahead and raise your hand, or go ahead and unmute yourself and just say your name. Okay, seeing none, well, thank you all. That is the elections.
Ellie has the results.
Oh, Ellie has the results. Okay, shall we go forward with this?
Yes, ma'am.
Please proceed.
Thank you all for your ongoing commitments in serving this board and serving your community. It is my pleasure to announce that you have elected as the Vice Chair, Patricio Pacheco. Thank you, Patricio. And it is also my pleasure to announce that you have elected as the Chair, Ms. Elena Fernandez. Thank you.
Thank you all, Patricio. Congratulations, Patricio. Thank you all. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
I just did want to say thank you to the fellow CAB members, and I'm looking forward to serving us as a group and my community, and looking forward to a good year for us. Thank you.
Excellent. And thank you all for your thoughtful comments. And Patricio, I look forward to working with you more. Yes, and one day you will be chair. I see, we see it. And I wanted to thank all of you for your support and trust in me as we move forward together. So let's move on. As Johnny Carson said, I am humbled by that.
You'll take on this. Just wanted to let everyone know that Elena and Patricia will take office October 1st. So Sherilyn and Elena will continue hopefully through September 30th. I know Elena will. Sherilyn's term ends a little early, but we're seeing if we can extend that to September 30th. Thank you and congratulations to everyone who put their name out. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, just thank you again. And now, we are ahead of schedule. Should I?
Go ahead.
Wow. Let me know if I'm going too fast.
You want time with Ike?
Pardon?
You want time with Ike?
We do. Okay, so let's move on to the report from MDAH, Material Disposal Area H, for those of you who are online or listening. So what you have in the goldenrod, I suppose it's goldenrod, sheet in your packet, and those of you online, it's the second to the last page. We have constructed an outline. Now, I want to state that the outline that you have here, because this is an ongoing draft recommendation, and we are still in the drafting phase, some of that information has changed, and I will read it out to you. And apologies to Manise and Bridget for not getting it to you sooner, but it's conversation after conversation, and it's refining, and it is out of the most protective stance that we want for our community and for safety. So based on conversations and input with members of the Risk Evaluation and Management Subcommittee, we've created an outline of what seems to be the path toward a draft recommendation. Since we are in the draft phase, again, the outline has changed. The draft recommendation on MDAH, Material Disposal Area H, will be ready for your review prior to the August 23rd? August 23rd WebEx Combined Committee meeting. So this meeting is not in person, it's in line. Please join us by WebEx.
9 to noon.
9 to noon, and Bridget will send out the information. Please note that if any recommendation is passed by the CAB, or even within a subcommittee, any member of the CAB or a subcommittee may write a minority opinion if they are not in agreement with the passed draft recommendation. So that option is available to members. So with MDAH, in the past, I don't have it here, are the alternatives. And this falls under the inventory details and remedy alternatives in a prior presentation, which we don't have with us right now. So alternative number 1 is no action. We just leave Material Disposal Area H alone. Here we go. Thank you, Bridget. Perfect. So these are the screening of alternatives. This is alternative number 1, no action. As you know, MDAH is an area that has several shafts, and please jump in, our experts, if I misstate, or if you'd like to clarify. It has several shafts that have been dug into the tufa, and those were filled with materials. There are some classified materials, there are some hazardous materials, there are some explosives, and there are also some aerosols, I believe, some gases, some radioactive gases. Is that correct? Tritium and deuterium? No.
Not directly. There is trace tritium.
Trace tritium?
And we have potentially explosive materials.
And potentially explosive materials.
And
Dave, would you like to take a microphone?
The mic's right here, Dave.
So this is David Deal. He is one of our technical experts, and he'll give you some more information on what is in the shafts so that you can consider this further. Go ahead.
okay, yeah, the primary constituents of MDAH are, as mentioned before, high explosives that were deposited. We also have depleted uranium. We have some lithium compounds that are potentially reactive when you expose them to air or water. So there's a concern about that when mixed with potential high explosives. Then we have some metals. We have some other metals other than depleted uranium, which are not considered reactive, some radioactive materials, plastics, which would include film used to take pictures of research, and then some graphite that likely was used to create molds that for high explosives.
Excellent, thank you, David. And the area is secure, it is fenced, there is no activity. It is placed between two roads, two major roads in Los Alamos. We've passed by it many times on tours. And so that is the state of MDAH. So these are the alternatives. The EMLA is seeking a remedy for this. The alternative is, you have before you, alternative 1, no action, means we just leave it alone. And then, thank you, alternative 2A would be a multi-layer Resource Recovery and Conservation Act cover. This is, or RCRA, it is a man-made material, so there is some concern that this cover, while protective, could deteriorate over time and then introduce new chemicals, to put it generally, into that area. There is a cover over the shafts. There's some concrete and some soil. So there's about a 6-foot cover, I believe. Is that correct? Why don't you sit over here? Come sit over here.
Sorry, we just realized we
You're
probably
fine.
ought to sit over here.
Yeah. Go ahead, please. Yes, please correct me, and if you want, that would be great.
I'm sorry, what?
We're talking about the shafts and how they're covered.
Yeah, they were covered with what we call an operational cover, which is soil, crushed tough, that sort of thing. There's, I want to say 6 feet of that, but the shafts themselves were sealed at the top with a 3-foot concrete plug to keep water and to seal it up so nobody could get to it, because these are classified materials that were not liquids and no longer useful for their intended use. There's another term in there, but basically they were done using the materials. They didn't want anybody to get to it for various reasons, and then they covered it with the concrete plug and the soil cover.
Thank you. Would you please stay there so we can keep you here? Just please stay. Yeah, so that is the state of MDAH, and if water, oxygen, any sort of vibration could further.
Yes, the high explosives that are in there, there was a study done in 2010 by uranium and high explosives experts that recommended not to touch this stuff because it can either deflagrate, which is a slow burn where it goes across the matter, or it could detonate, which we all know what detonate means. So there was, that can occur through several processes: pinching, compression, heat added, scratching, vibration. There's a myriad of ways that this stuff could kind of go in a direction you don't want it to go, if disturbed.
Okay, if disturbed. Okay, that's good to know. So that's why these remedies have been offered to us. So we have the multi-layer RCRA cover. If we move to the next slide, we have alternative 2B, which would be an evapotranspiration cover. Now this helps draw. It is protective, but it also helps draw moisture from the ground, correct?
Yeah, the idea of an evapotranspiration cover is we have a lot more potential evaporation here in northern New Mexico. So what we try and do is use this cover to soak up water when it rains or we have snowmelt. And then because of our evaporation potential here, we get a lot less moisture from the sky than will be uptaken by evaporation. So the idea is that we use natural materials that won't break down over time. They've already gone through their breakdown process to create sort of a sponge that then releases back to the atmosphere when we get warmer and all that. We also put vegetation on top of them, native species that can withstand this environment, that transpire water out of the ground. So you have a double mechanism going on there that we like a lot better than the cover that you showed before.
Okay, thank you. I'll get to your questions in just a moment, as I really want to hear what you have to say. Let me finish this part. Is that okay with you guys? Roger and Beverly? Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. So that is the evapotranspiration cover. And then alternative 3 is the excavation and full removal. Now, that would be done by remote handling for safety reasons. And could you briefly explain where MDAH is and?
Okay, so for those who are familiar, and you've mentioned that you've taken a number of tours up there, so you are familiar. Pyrito Road, or also known as the corridor, starts at the gate, the badge check gate in White Rock, and runs all the way up the hill along Pyrito Road till you get to the main campus of the lab. We're roughly in between the main lab and White Rock, just off of Pyrito Road, and there's a road that's next to us that runs out to MDA or CH True area or MDAG or Area G, depending on which document you're looking at. And so it's sort of pinched right in between a very busy road and then an access road to other waste disposal locations.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move forward with the outline, and then I'm going to get to our members' questions and comments. This is because it's pertinent too. So hearing that, Roger, go ahead and keep your thing up.
Got it, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So hearing that and seeing our alternatives, hearing David's comments and expertise. So our subcommittee thanks you, the CAB, and the public for your trust in us with this delicate topic. So we'll hear more from you. I want to give you a quick draft outline, and then we'll move to discussion, and then we'll start with Beverly and Roger. So the draft outline that we have, of course, it's changed somewhat. So based on our communications, here's what could be in the recommendation. 1, an evapotranspiration cover with enhanced and more frequent monitoring. The above scenario is an enhanced measure. It is not a final remedy. As an added measure of protection, not to be considered, again, not to be considered a final remedy, because it is active. In the meantime, the CAB requires more information on the stability of the area. And speaking for myself, I wouldn't want any harm to befall anyone with this program. Please note that there is consensus that there is high hazard risk involved that comes both from the remote handling and then after handling, if it is handled. Concurrently, we must consider the risk from leaving the waste, as some of the waste has degraded over time. It is not in the same situation as it was when it was put in the ground or placed in the ground. Essentially, the waste is not in a state equal to that of when it was placed there, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Great. And then you'll see item 4, but that has changed somewhat on your outline. I'm sure there's been plenty of exploration of a comprehensive plan for removal. That also includes, it's not just the removal, but it's also the financial aspects of it, the budget and the technology involved. So our discussions concluded that the 2 roads would need to be shut down. Blast shielding would need to be put in place. Coverage and an HVAC system may need to be installed to remove aerosolized contaminants from releasing, although this may not be entirely feasible if the area does detonate. Is that correct?
Yes.
So with the excavation, it's not
Implosion.
instead of, if there's some way to collapse it.
Would you collapse it inward?
Yes. Would you be able to collapse it inward to contain it, or is it just always in a state where we need to consider that it may explode, detonate outward?
My inclination is to say, based on the concern about friction or pinching or whatever, that and the fact that it's explosive, if you started driving it closer together, there's much greater
make it
potential
worse.
for it to go sideways.
And what is, I'm sorry, not to laugh, but it is, that's a gasp. What would be the radius then?
To me, that depends on how much of the high explosive, if it does detonate, how close to the surface it would be, and then the types of materials that potentially get uplifted, or, you know, I guess one of my concerns is that if you do have a closer to surface detonation, it could then proceed down the shaft and then start proceeding to the other shafts, which I believe if you had it open, you know, you've got depleted uranium, you've got other things in there that you really don't want to have airborne. So I don't have an estimate of how big this might be, but I can see a scenario where it would not be good for the local community.
Thank you. Yes, that is something to consider as well. The site does contain classified materials, thus workers must have the appropriate level of clearance or clearances for such classified material handling. No classified materials may escape, and the area must be covered when excavating.
Right.
Yes.
When there's not an active operation, it would have to be secured. We would have to have cleared people or escorts. We'd also have to have a declassification area, which, you know, now you're starting to take things out, handling them, looking at them, and then moving them into another place. So there's more handling than just sort of picking it up and putting it in a drum and going, whew.
Yes, thank you. So, please consider comments that came from the subcommittee from Manny and Roger, and I quote, and Manny, I'm quoting you, and Roger as well. The contractor N3B has stated that MDAH is stable, or mostly stable.
Yes. You know, it's been down there for 60 years, I want to say. So it's been in that condition. We've seen no evidence of anything sparking or doing anything untoward that we would not like to see.
Okay.
So yeah, it's at this point we believe it's stable and should stay stable for a couple of reasons.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, so for Manny and Roger, N3B is not able to safely and without incident mitigate the site. This is a quote. They have recommended a cap and cover option, and Manny agrees with that assessment. The site contains energetic and pyrophoric materials, lithium, depleted uranium, and classified materials, posing a unique combination of fire, explosion, frag, hazmat, and security hazards. Even a minor event could trigger a cascading release, resulting in a catastrophic event of national significance extending onto Pueblo lands, Los Alamos, and Santa Fe counties.
That's a really nice summation.
Yeah, and I appreciate Roger and Manny for that. So we would like to see a comprehensive and feasible plan for excavation of full removal that is protective of the local community, downwind communities, the workers, and the environment. However, given that some research has gone into this, the best available science and technology may not necessarily be the best existing science and technology to mitigate this site. So we can proceed with the discussion. We want to hear your thoughts, and I'm glad you're here. Could you do a quick introduction of yourself before we move to our questions?
Okay, so my name is David Deal. I'm the program manager for the Material Disposal Areas Closure Program, MDAs. Been working on this for several years at this point, and we've been looking, I know we've talked in various forums about the other MDAs. So we have a comprehensive slate of sites that are both interesting and in some cases a little bit scary. But that's what I do.
Great, thank you, and I appreciate it, and yeah, stay safe. Yeah. We need you, we need our experts.
No, I wasn't going anywhere, I just...
Oh, you're fine.
Free.
No, I said stay safe, don't leave.
Yeah.
We need you here, we need your work, and we need you here. So let's begin. Beverly, please.
I have a question about the classified parts that are in MDAH. Are they contaminated with HE? Is that the acceptable knowledge on them? Or, I mean, Normally, you just wouldn't put classified parts in a disposal area. So that I'm guessing that there's some kind of contamination, known contamination on them. And then you would have to decon those if you remove those, so it adds another layer of complexity.
Yes, and, I mentioned before graphite, which typically is high explosive molds. In a lot of cases, it was mentioned that they did what they called flashing those, which would have burned the stuff on the outside. But graphite is porous, and the experts also suggested that it's penetrated into that matrix, and so it's near surface, didn't flash off because it didn't have a direct source. But if you start having something going off near it, it could potentially combine with what's in that mold. And then you have the pyrophorics, which is another. So pyrophorics are compounds or materials that when they get wet, they have the potential to spontaneously combust, which you really don't want. That's the heat factor of the high explosives is, this stuff spontaneously combust, and it's been shown at other sites, it's happened before, where they've spontaneously combusted. It's not a desirable situation in any case, but especially when you have high explosives right near it.
Thank you. Okay, Roger, please.
I thought I'd ask first, what's your name?
I'm David Deal.
David? Yeah. Yeah. And your name?
Kevin Reed.
Kevin? Yeah, I don't know if this is a good, question and answer, segment. I thought maybe I would start this out by saying I've enjoyed the presentations that you've provided to the CAB, I think on a couple of occasions, and probably 3 occasions today. One of my questions is, I think you presented that the items that are in the shaft are percentages of the volume of the shafts. Is that how it's kind of put together? Are you familiar with how much of each item is in each shaft? I mean, is there a pretty good log of that kind of information?
Yeah, and actually on this presentation, what we did earlier is we presented the percentages by weight. So that's that pie chart. And I don't know if you guys can back up these slides at all, but we the pie chart with the percentages is by weight, and then we also took those different types of waste and we prepared the locations of the different waste within the shafts. So yeah. So this pie chart just shows the different components of the waste on a percent by weight basis.
And this is in the total of the 6 shafts?
Yep.
Or 9 shafts. But I guess my question is, knowing what items are in which different shafts would...
Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, so this is the table that shows all the inventory. So for each of the 9 shafts, there's a line-by-line inventory of what was disposed of in each shaft. And the inventory is, it's all classified materials. So we're lucky that there's as much description as there is in this table. But basically it gave sometimes a description of what the materials were. Other times it would just say stuff like scrap metal or undescribed, and approximate materials, how much of it was, the volume of it, and then the weight and the depth. So we basically have a line-by-line disposal history for each one of these shafts. And so what we did from this table then is we You can go to the next slide. Is we color coded, or down, yep. We color coded the types of material that were disposed. Yeah, you can go one more down. Yep, there you go. Yep, yep. So that what these figures show is each, like on the left, so that box on the left, we have 3 different shafts, shafts 4, 9, and 5, and each one of those layers is a different type of waste that's been disposed of. And then it's hard to see on the screen, but in the handouts, if you have good reading glasses, you could see what the individual waste types are disposed. And then we just took it one step further and just translated into stable materials, which would be like scrap metal or other debris that's non-reactive. And then we colored those black, and then anything that was potentially reactive, we colored red. So on this figure on the right, it shows shaft 4, 9, and 5. And you can just see basically the red layers are potentially unstable or potentially reactive materials, and the black layers are stable materials. So we have a pretty good idea of the configuration of the waste in the shafts and what's stable and what's unstable or potentially unstable.
Well, and this is probably a little difficult for a layperson to understand as far as the particular items and their potential volatility if a catastrophic event occurred. Are there people besides yourselves that have done an analysis if the item in one of these shafts was somehow activated? Would that cause a catastrophic event along the lines? I mean, with this Friday having Oppenheimer coming out on the big screen, I mean, people can kind of imagine what catastrophic event would look like. But I mean, are we talking about a lesser amount of volatility except for the fact that these shafts are so closely configured together?
Yeah. So I'll answer this the best I can, and Brad, feel free to correct me if I throw this off.
There's been a lot of discussion.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Okay.
This will be a good discussion.
Yeah. So we have depleted uranium that is interspersed with metals, plastics, and other things. You mentioned Oppenheimer and the end result that theoretically will be the end of that movie. I don't know that we see the potential for, say, a critical mass to develop, because that's a very specified, very engineered. This is more of just a rubble mix. So I can't see a scenario where you would have that sort of event. The thing that concerns me the most is if we did have some sort of reaction in the high explosives, that you then liberated the depleted uranium, you would create a cloud of dispersed particles, dust, that could then travel, depending on which way the wind was blowing, anywhere from theoretically Espanola to Santa Fe or further south. It just depends if the day it happened and what the winds were. But that's our biggest concern, is that we would create a relatively large aerial particle plume.
So the plume models that go out, we have not simulated, because we would have to, I think that's the next step in the corrective measures evaluation, is really taking the materials that are there, and we have had other events around the world that things have been emitted from shafts or similar structures, that once they are out, that then is at, I'll just say, Mother Nature and what she's doing that day. Because it can be localized, but regardless, if it's energetic enough, it is going to go other places. And then you have the reclamation of all those other places. You have to consider not just what started out as MDAH, but it's everywhere else now. And those that have looked at, we'll call it the Separations Processing Research Unit at Knowles Atomic Power Lab about a decade ago, that was a simple one that literally was just rainwater getting into some contamination running down and contaminating not only a hillside, but also having to go through a river. My biggest, when we were talking about Middle DP Road, is making sure we have a very considered view of how we go after that, because the last thing you want to do is, we're right across the road from Los Alamos, not only the main road and the airport, but the neighborhoods and the city. So you want to have a very considered view before you ever enter into, because once the event happens, you can't control it. And to me, that is the biggest caution we really want to have, is that consideration, so that not only N3B, EMLA, but also NMED and others are all on board, because we have to be very specific with the work plans that we put in place, have the right contractors or workers trained and able to go and do this. But it's also having the recovery mechanisms as you find additional materials or whatever else because you may, that you can handle those as you go off. Because again, once you start breaking ground, the containment that exists today no longer exists. I don't know if that helps or clarifies.
Well, and I would add that, there were also recommendations, if we put a cover in place, some controls over vibration equipment and all that. So there was, this is with the waste 6 or 8 feet below the ground surface. We would still be having, serious training for our workers, controls. So it's not just like some of these other sites where we can go out and just start dumping cap material and spreading it out and compacting. This would be that was what was recommended, was, it's be a more controlled process than what we would normally see in a non-impacted site like this.
And I think another aspect, you'll hear the term means and methods. So I think, Elena, what you said was spot on from the standpoint of technologies, or whoever put that, the phraseology together, because that is exactly right. This might require certain types of non-sparking tools that are more on an industrial level that we may have to engineer to make sure that they are fit for purpose. So there's little things we use for drum handling that are brass so that they are non-sparking. Well, that's on a 55-gallon drum that we've all seen and kind of get our heads around. When you get in here and you're starting with whether it's an excavator or some sort of other tool, you have to really ensure that you have no sparking mechanism. The energetics that are going in, we were talking about vibration, it has to be, there are things you can do. We've seen, you go by a road work and you see them blasting out concrete. Well, I'm not saying it's that energetic, but there will be some vibrations that are in there, and we need to make sure that whatever we do with the tools, that the people are protected and that we're not initiating any further events from that happening. So that, and we call it a job hazards analysis, that we will execute, and we will have many experts. There will be a lot of interest in the analysis that was done.
Well, and it's fairly obvious to me. I mean, in the design of this waste disposal operation, that they basically created like a gun barrel. I mean, if you have explosives in one of those shafts and it's ignited, I mean, there may be some movement side to side, but most of it's going to be out the shaft. And is there any talk about ways of introducing in the areas where you have high explosives? And I would think high explosives are the biggest concern of starting something catastrophic. Is there any way of implementing something that would cause those explosives to be inert or take away their potential explosive compound? And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and well, just one thing to give credit for the people that disposed of this waste is actually before they disposed of the high explosives components, a lot of it was flashed, and so it was detonated before it was disposed of. But we don't know the complete burning of it, or if all the high explosives was used up and disposed of. And as Dave mentioned, with those molds and casts, that there is residual holes and crannies where the material may not have been flashed. And so we have, configurations of waste where we know approximately where the high explosives are disposed of, but, we can't be 100% positive of any of this, really.
And there are other sites around the world that have had graphite reactors, like the Piles project in the UK. And there are stored energies inside once you start breaking the bonds called Wigner energies that I don't know, we would just sit around and have a conversation about. But just think of your charcoal at home. That's really what you're talking about is as you're starting to break this up, if it does ignite, now it will continue on until the source material's gone, which now it's not just the heat of the graphite mold per se, but it could be any other materials that are in there. So it's not that you can't deal with it, it's just getting the right people around the table to help us with that approach. I think it's a good question. That's what we're.
So,
David.
First of all, your comment about potentially a gun barrel. One of my former colleagues described it as a potential Roman candle scenario where you could get something going and progress down and continue progressing down. And I've talked to a couple of HE people, and I'm like, is this real? And they were, yes, it's very potentially real. You talk about some sort of inerting in place. With the metals and the other debris that's down there that's difficult to penetrate, and not knowing the full interlocking of how the different pieces of waste are, without drilling or doing something like that, it's very difficult to make sure that you've gotten your inerting material down 65 feet. It's just, there's a sure way to do it if you know that nothing's going to be affected by it. You drill it and you go down and you come back up to the surface. But this, drilling it introduces heat, introduces pinching, introduces vibration. So.
I was going to say, and there's one other thing, lest we forget, there's going to be a waste acceptance criteria to this.
Okay.
Without starting with a waste acceptance criteria, you never start work, right? Because now I don't know what my end game is for the packaging, I'm going to transport, where it's going to go. So really, we need that characterization to be able to have discussions with everyone so we can say, this is what a typical package looks like. 20 years ago, there were plutonium containers called 3013, DOE standard 3013 containers that had never, they were brand new. We had to bring in a host of experts from DOE headquarters, from Sandia National Lab and others to help license these little containers. They were about this big, containing whatever was in it. And then there was what looked like a 55-gallon drum that had vermiculite and molds and everything else. These things sat in and nestled. But they needed to go through all the testing, whether it was pool fires, ignitability, transport, compression, and other things that then would be part of the handbook to evaluate so that wherever their resting place was, which now Savannah River is largely it, that when they built the vaults to hold these until they got to the processing protocols, they were safe. And that's one of the things, that's the other thing. So for me, everything N3B does and EMLA and NMED wants us to do is really predicated on what's the waste acceptance criteria that I'm going to end up needing to meet to ensure safety.
I had two questions, but David may have already answered the one. But the first one was, are these evaluations, these analyses done all by EMLA personnel? Are there third parties involved? How does that work?
Okay, with regard to the study that was done by the high explosives experts and the depleted and uranium experts, it was actually it was a committee that was drawn from different places in the country. I think more than half the committee was from here, but they did have outside folks advising them.
Is that like from the manufacturers of the explosives or the universities? What?
I believe we did. Yeah.
I haven't read the reference material, but typically you end up, so you have third-party confirmation, so you don't have what I'll call a one-sided bias that one goes in.
All right, and the second question, Dave, which you may have answered, was has any consideration been given to trying to flood these shafts, whether with oils or acids or anything else, inert gases that might ameliorate the possibility of what's down there?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to one of Roger's questions as well of what could be done to neutralize these. And I think one of the complicating factors is that there's not really like a single treatment that, because we have all these different types of waste in there, you know, depleted uranium, high explosives, lithium, and radioactive materials, each one of those responds differently to whether it be water or oil or, you know, inert gas. So it's, if it was a single outfall of only high explosives, we could have a treatment. But, you know, when you mix in all these other types of waste, then it really increases the complexity.
But was that process considered?
Well, so in the removal options, it did talk about what basically building a dome and creating an inert atmosphere within the dome in a positive pressure situation. So that was explored as the remedial option number 3.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, David and Brad and Kevin. And let's move on. Jim, you have a... Yes, you are. Please, please proceed.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I just have a process statement. I think the last half hour, 45 minutes has been invaluable for several reasons. One is having you folks sitting at the table with us and having an exchange like Roger's questions and others is what I've been looking for ever since I joined the CAB. I was, I think, kind of critical in the last session we had when we got this presentation, which was great. But for me, it would have been much better if we'd have carried right into this discussion instead of going kind of around the hoop to risk. And I understand we have rules and we're supposed to do it this way and that way. But I think this kind of a dialogue and getting more of us involved, I don't have any idea what the right answer is. But what I have an idea about when I think about the public that's out there listening to this dialogue, listening to this discussion, we all should feel better. And we have people around this table like Roger and others who can ask these kinds of questions, and you guys can come up with the great answers because you've already researched so much of it. So my point is, if we can have, and I don't know whether, one more thing, to me, in all the situations we've seen so far with the chrome plume, this one seems to have more what should I say, possibility for serious issue than anything we've looked at. And I think we're up to that. I think we're up to listening to everything you guys are offering. And I think we're up to a very good discussion among ourselves about what it means to the public. I think I know what I would suggest in a remedy, and I think some of the rest of you are the same way. But my point is, let's figure out a way to have more dialogues like this as a part of our meetings and have the experts come and sit down with us around the table. So, thank you. And if we can figure out a way to do that, Elena, next, after October.
Thank you, Jim.
It'd be great. Thank you.
No, I appreciate your comments, Jim. And in the past, we've had more chance for dialogue. That's changed a little, but we're getting back to that. So I do appreciate that. That is something that we've always having a back and forth and discussion is very helpful as we consider these options and these delicate matters. And now let's move to Mark.
Thank you, Elena. As I look at this, it's maybe more of a comment as we shape this for a vote at the next meeting, and that is who's not at the table and who hasn't commented yet. And I know the environment is being represented, Environment Department in the State of New Mexico by Neelam Dwan and Rick Sheen. I haven't heard their comments yet because they haven't heard the proposal to comment on, and that's going to happen later this year, is what I understand. So as we move forward, I think I like the idea of 1, 2, and 3, the evaporative cover with more frequent monitoring, enhanced measure with other protections as a final remedy. But I'd like to make this contingent on comments from the Environment Department and the public near the end. With that in mind, I think it's a good proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And yes, any recommendation that we write is in consideration of all the entities, not just what our counterparts are doing at N3B and EMLA, but also what's happening with the NMED, any regulatory oversight, any considerations by them, and their scientific and technological expertise, and within the confines of how New Mexico's regulations work, and especially in consideration from the public. So that's why we need more public participation so that we can understand what it is they want and make them give them the knowledge that they need so that they can come back to us so that we can understand what they want. And then we write that into our recommendations. And that's what happened with the chromium plume recommendation. It took into consideration the regulatory agency, the public, the CAB, and of course, yeah, all the stakeholders. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Stakeholders as well. Thank you, Mark. That's a very good point, and that's good to say it out loud and get it on the record that this is how we operate, and this is how we move forward with recommendations, and it is based on these discussions. So I'm glad that we're having a discussion, an open discussion again, and that we have our experts at the table. And NMED is here, and I'm grateful for them to be here as well. So, do we have, Stephen, please.
Last quick question. It's a procedural one. Is there some way to build more flexibility to our time schedules? We too often seem to be guided by the schedule rather than guided by getting to some sort of a conclusion. Can we not figure out a way to expand that at least with some flexibility?
So we are ruled by Robert's rules, but I'm sure there's some way we can have more open discussion. Denise, would you please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the agendas themselves are prepared with the input from the executive committee, with the DDFO regarding the topic, the presentation, who will present, that sort of thing. But also, as you noticed today, no formal presentation because we heard you loud and clear that you wanted time to yourselves to talk in this sort of a format. So we listened to that. We prepared the agenda that way. So certainly with your leadership's input, your input, we will go from here and prepare the agendas accordingly. We can expand the time. There's a number of things that we can do. But when we are in the agenda format, that's when the rules kick in, that we start on time. We really try to end on time to respect that and have the public comment period on time as well. Does that answer pretty much?
Pretty much. I was just
Okay.
thinking, like, for example, we've got from 4:30 to 5 comments from the board. We
Yes.
could say that was from 4:30 to 9, but we have the right to quit early if there's nobody in acting.
Well, we used to meet from 1 to 7 in my day, but it gets hard for people. So it's up to the board. Some boards meet for 2 days, so we'll talk about that probably maybe in a workshop setting or something. You can decide on how you would like to proceed, keeping in mind that folks have a hard time getting away from work or whatever, but it is flexible, to answer your question.
Thank you. Let's go to, hang on, Kevin. Let's go to Patricio first, and then we'll go to Kevin.
Thank you, Elena. I did just have a quick question back to MDH in the shafts. I do recall seeing one of the shafts without a top layer of soil. I believe it was shaft 9. I believe you may want to go back a slide or two to see that shaft, but I was just curious, why do all the other shafts have a top layer of soil and not that particular shaft?
Okay, so I believe what you're talking about is so all of our records show that the shafts were drilled into tuff. The last 3 feet was completed with concrete as a plug, but there is a small slab out there that was put out there, I believe, for vibration. Don't quote me on that, but that is a surface feature as opposed to the actual security of that shaft, because we've got at least 3 feet of soil above all the plugs.
Great. So I did notice there was some seismic activity up there back in 2021. How confident do you guys feel on that 3-foot plug?
So that was something that was evaluated in the previous CME that is now being incorporated into this one. There are particular seismic zones, but that particular area is not has not been determined to be a risk. It's further, I believe it's to the south and then up around the edge of the caldera. But they rated this as a low-risk area.
Great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on that. So the way they closed those shafts was that they did put the 3-foot layer of concrete, and then they put a layer of soil, 3 feet of soil on top of shafts 1 through 8. And the reason why they did that is because since it was classified area and classified disposal, they put the soil to basically blend it into the hillside so that it wouldn't be visible from overhead flights or so forth. And then the last shaft, number 9, they just did 6 feet of concrete, and I couldn't tell you why it was only concrete, and because right below that layer is an unknown inventory of disposed. It's not recorded, so I don't know. I'm not sure why that one prescribed a concrete only cap.
Potentially, maybe more hazardous.
Don't know.
Or less, yeah. Great. Thank you, Michael. Steve, thank you.
Thank you, Patricio. Thank you, Kevin. Did you want to continue?
Oh, I was just going to say my comment was in response to Jim's acknowledgement of the discussion we've been having, and just to acknowledge this group here for requesting more detail on the inventory and the configuration of the inventory. And that's what led us to develop these more additional analysis of the way the waste was configured and how it was arranged. So we definitely appreciate your all's feedback on that, and making us do a little bit more investigation and figuring things out more. So we appreciated those comments, and that's why we developed that follow-up presentation.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? This is your time. This is your discussion time. We also have a break at 2:45. Beverly?
So we were talking about the cap being more of an interim measure on the risk committee rather than the final remedy. Is there any more discussion on that, or can we have some discussion on that?
So, thanks, Beverly. That's a good point. We did, in the outline, it's called an enhanced measure and not a final remedy for an evapotranspiration cover until we have that science and technology to do the full removal and excavation. I've heard from members of the public that they would love to have that area completely excavated and then remediated, but it's not that simple. And we want to do it as safely and protectively as possible, and also honoring the needs and wants of the community. And that's why we call it an enhanced measure. And I don't know if within the consent order, N3B, we can call it an enhanced measure, or does it have to be designated an interim measure?
I'm not sure what the question was there. Can we call it an interim measure or?
We were calling it an enhanced measure, not a final remedy, but does the consent order allow it to be called an enhanced measure, or must it be designated interim measure, to Beverly's point? Yeah, so the thing is, we don't want to call it a final remedy because we want it to be an ongoing process. And Neelam? Hi. Okay, yes. So Neelam, could you please introduce yourself?
I'm Neelam Dewan. I work with I'm a LANL group manager with NMCAB, Hazardous Waste Bureau. And consent order is under our purview. And the consent order does not talk about enhanced measures, but it does talk about interim measures. So that's just, to me, terminology. But I do like the idea because it's not really a final remedy. We are leaving waste in place, and we are basically kicking the can down the road. Somebody eventually has to tackle with it. And if it's unsafe today, it's going to be unsafe in future too. So we will look at it when we receive the formal document CME from them, from DOE, and we will review it. We will review all their selections and recommendations, and then we will make a decision. These are tough questions because there are some safety issues, but at the same time, this is not a final remedy because the waste is going to be left in place. It's going to be monitored in perpetuity till you can get to the point that you know it's no longer harmful and sitting in there. So it's a challenge. All the MDAs are a challenge because they were not thought out at that time. They are not lined. They are not properly built. They're just basically holes in the ground, and we don't even have a good handle on inventory. I think you've really refined it over time, but I still am not sure it is because I sat through discussions when first time MDAH was discussed. And I think the VOCs were considered not a contaminant because the soil data did not show VOCs. And soil, it's hard to detect VOCs in soil unless until you follow proper methodology. So eventually, we had poor gas data that did show that there was some VOCs. And the thought was that maybe there were these solvent rags that were disposed of. Because at that time, I think more focus was on radionuclides because they were expensive, they were precious. So I don't know how much hazardous chemicals the inventory focused on. So, yeah, so there is no, this is a long-winded answer to your question. There is no term as enhanced measures in the consent order, but interim measures means the same thing.
So I would, Neelam reminded me of something that, you know, we talk about these remedies, the covers, but there's other parts of the cover of the remedy as well, which includes institutional controls, which is, you know, inspections, keeping track to make sure that nothing has changed, potential evaluation in the future of what's out there and if there's new technologies. You know, and I'm not saying that, I know I was asked that question in one of our presentations, whether reevaluations of these sites would ever happen. You know, I can't speak to that, but to me, that seems like a reasonable, you know, as we move forward, if we don't get better at this over time and dealing with some of these harder to deal with issues, shame on us. You know, we really should. The technology needs to continue growing, and I know it has. I mean, there's stuff that Kevin and I have talked about potentially recovering, say, americium out of solids in concrete. So people are still working new technology, But at this point, as we've pretty obviously stated, getting into this stuff at this point with what we have is just, it's not a good idea. And that's what the experts have told us. But we aren't just capping it and just letting it sit there. We're still monitoring over time. We'll still be collecting vapor samples, and that's all will be outlined in the corrective measures evaluation when it comes out.
So
But in the corrective measures evaluation, are you proposing the cap as a final remedy or an interim measure? That's my question.
Okay. I was trying to, I was trying to find out under Robert's rules if I was allowed. I mean, I think at this point, we've been here enough, and thank you for your appreciation. We appreciate you, as Kevin said. I think it's pretty obvious that what we're going to recommend is an ET cover for this site with institutional controls and long-term monitoring.
As a final remedy. Yes, that's what would be, because generally statement of basis, see, they would submit the CME to NMED. NMED will make a selection, and that is generally for the final remedy. So that is where I am, the interim measures you were talking about. That's where you try to control the source, try to protect the environment, protect the human health, and have these measures in place. But when it comes as a proposal cap and cover, it does come as a final remedy, and that's where NMED has a little heartburn with to leave the waste in place and consider it. And it's not going to go away. If it was some kind of a waste that would naturally degrade over time, then it makes sense to just monitor for a while. And so, yeah, those are the hard decisions for NMED to make. The other thing, I missed the part of initial your presentation. I'm sorry we were late. Did you, last time when I was discussing MDAH, there was a discussion of trenching and recovering material, like trenching on the sides of the shafts, going down, say, 3 feet, recovering the material, then trenching further, recovering the material, and access the shafts from the sides. Have you looked at that?
Well, yes, it's on. We did talk about that. That was part of these profile, that we produced. We could not find a location. There's one shaft, I think, that the top part of it doesn't have any potentially reactive materials in it, but it's sandwiched in between two that have it fairly high up. And so we had tried to evaluate from those profiles if perhaps a partial or targeted removal with proximity of the shafts right next to it on both sides. And there was only maybe 1 or 2 of those that even potentially presented that way. So we just didn't see that as a...
There was a talk of, because you have classified materials, to have some sort of tent or something on top so you protect it from satellites. And there was a talk of some inert environment, creating an inert environment and, shelving, basically, trenching, and then be accessing the shafts from the side and recovering. So I don't know if that's something you considered this time.
Well, to me, the overriding, the no pinching, no abrasion, no compression, no heat. You start opening up the sides, you expose potentially reactive materials to air, humidity. I know it's low here, but still. And that's a really dry mesa. We have moisture content in that down around those shafts of, I want to say, about 10%. I'm looking for Kevin here. Is that the right number?
Jim's still.
It's actually less than 10%, which is, it's basically a dead mesa. It doesn't have any water that's recharging it, and it's got sides that are breathing in and out. So the moisture in the formation, because there's no moisture being introduced to speak of, is evaporated, and it's pretty much what our air is, because you do have that inhalation, exhalation in the rock, and it picks it up really quick. That's why the evapotranspiration covers are so desirable in this area. We can evaporate 60 inches of water a year here, precip is 18 to 20 on a good day, good year. So, I mean, the balance is so far different. I've been in places where it rains 60 inches a year and it evaporates 15 inches a year. And I can tell you that is a lot more miserable environment to be in than it is here. So that's why these because it's humid, hot, sticky all the time. That's why these covers are so, and they've been demonstrated to work in the Southeast. You know, we have the airport landfill cover. We have the pilot studies that were done down in Albuquerque at Sandia. We have other places in the lab where we monitor moisture in the soil, and we've clearly shown that the moisture is taken back up out of the soil and the formations due to that evaporation transpiration.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Neelam. Jim, we need to wrap up soon. Jim, did you still have a question? Because yeah, go ahead.
Once again, I don't have a question. I was just a statement listening to what Beverly was asking about. I hope we don't get to a place where we're trying to figure out what final means on this kind of stuff. I hope we continue to think it's a continuous process. One of the struggles I've had in this whole year and a half I've been on the CAB is I came in here thinking we were going to do things. And now what I think we are is a forum for people to hear, as we are hearing, what's being done. And the central word to that is transparency. I don't know where the public would hear many of the things we're talking about if it wasn't for this. So, you know, I don't know what final is, but I think talking about what final is important.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Thank you, Jim. We appreciate that comment. That was a great discussion, and I appreciate our experts here, our subject matter experts. It's time for a break, so please take a break. And Ike White will be here, and Michael Michelanis will be here as well.
They're out in the hall.
They're out in the hall if you'd like to introduce yourselves. So, take a break.
3 o'clock.
Return at 3 o'clock?
Promptly at 3.
Promptly at 3 o'clock if you are on, oh, and then I'll talk to Joseph. I'm sorry, Joseph, I didn't see your hand. We're on a break right now, but if you just want to talk.
When you guys get back to break, I wanna say something. Can I?
Can you speak up? I can't hear you.
When you guys get back from your break, I would like to say something about this discussion. Can I please?
We'll do. We have we can talk to Ike White if you have questions for him, and Michael Michelanis. So we're going to have an update from Michael and then Ike White, and that's when your questions are encouraged. I'm sorry I didn't see your hand there, Joseph.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Jose Chappie.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
I wanted to use your formal name.
Yes, ma'am. You're fine.
Okay. Take a break, please. We'll see you at 3 o'clock, my friend. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed your break. Right now, we will go to a question from Joseph. He's online. Joseph, are you available? Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
So I'm speaking on behalf of my tribal nation as well as my community from Santa Fe. My tribal nation is the Texas Band of Yaqui Indians, and as an elder, I'm very concerned about all the discussion that's been taking place just now. And as a member of the CAB, I'm honored to serve. And yes, I'm a newly member of the CAB, but I do have a little bit of subject matter expertise, SME-wise, when it comes to dealing with the issue of emergency management. I'm very pleased to hear is it David Deal, I believe? That's his name? That spoke?
Yes, David Deal. Go ahead.
And Kevin Reed, right?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate you, both of you, for coming out and giving us a lot of information. Boy, did I do a lot of writing, a lot of notes here. What I'm concerned about, and I've been concerned about this for the longest time because the background that I have is emergency management. And I get it about the options or the alternatives that you guys or that we're talking about, there's some good ones. And but the issue about the emergency management part of it, that in an event if something did really happen to that particular site, where does the emergency management fit in this particular one? And how is it going to how are we going to mitigate it recovery wise? Or how are we going to take care of the community if an actual plume or radioactive material was released into the environment, into our indigenous communities, and throughout this whole thing? I understand that there's many people who do not understand what that emergency management process works. Part of the FEMA, the incident command system, training, exercising with your law enforcement, your fire departments in the local, tribal, state, federal levels, how to handle some type of I don't know, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear explosive, something going off, in particular at that site. Where does LAMO fit in? Where does DOE fit in? Where does DOD fit in on this particular topic? That's my concern. But in terms of the information that's been given out, outstanding on the part of David and Kevin and his crew. We need that dialogue, and not only the dialogue with this CAB, but we need this dialogue with our communities that are adjacent to Llano. Our tribal nations, our Chicano communities, Santa Fe, the whole northern part of the state of New Mexico. That collaboration, that conversation is badly needed. And it's not so much of a question about collaboration, because we're doing that right now. Como la gente, we're talking to each other respectfully and good conversation. But I just want to throw that in the air for David and Kevin in terms of where does the emergency management process in an event, if something did happen, where does it fit in? And are you talking to the people from the emergency management community, the little world? And if you're not, I sure like to get on that wagon. I sure like to sit down and conversate like, what are we going to do about it if something did happen? God forbid. But I just want to be in ready state, if you know what I mean. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yes, excellent comments. Ellie, would you like to take that, please?
Yes, and Joseph, thank you very much. I know you and I have spoken previously about our mutual background in emergency management, so I specifically appreciate that question. And members of the CAB, I'll be answering as a member of the field office rather than your DDFO in this capacity. However, this is an important question. EMLA and N3B are completely synced with NALA and Triad in matters of emergency management. As a matter of fact, we purchase that service from Triad under a service authorization work agreement so that we have one emergency response organization to assure a consistent and unified response to any emergency situation. We exercise that program regularly. We conduct drills and we perform analyses. Joseph, since you have an expertise in this area, you are very likely to be quite familiar with emergency planning hazard analysis documents, also known as EPHAs. Those are performed on any operation or any scope regardless of who the contractor executing that work is, whether it's N3B, Triad, a subcontractor. That's not pertinent to the activity itself. If we were to make the decision to venture into excavating these materials, an EPHA would have to be drafted and performed as a function of that operation. With that comes all of the protective evaluation levels and any sort of emergency response execution strategies appropriate to that scope of operations. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that response. Only concern that I have is just about the cultural competency of collaboration and the consultation act with tribal nations along the whole entire northern part of the state. That this particular organization that's doing this kind of training, that they're including our tribal nations and our expanded community, everybody down the line, everybody's all included. Nobody's excluded when it comes to emergency management of this type of nature. But the cultural competency is a really big deal, because you can do all the training, they can have all the training in emergency management that they want, but if you don't understand the traditions, the costumbres, the language, the traditions, I mean, the querencia of this community on the northern part of the state, then we got an issue here. It's almost like a kitchen table talk is what I'm talking about. If you can talk to me in my kitchen table with my mom and my dad, my grandma, my grandpa, and we can talk about this kind of stuff, well, la gente, like just real people, real world that we live in, then we can make things happen on a positive outcome. Thank you, though. I appreciate your comment.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Joseph. Appreciate it. That's, yes, very relevant. We need to speak to our people where they live and how they live. Should we? Okay. Would you like to introduce our, Ellie, would you like to introduce our special guests?
Members of the CAB, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Michael Michelanis, who is the field office manager, and Ike White, who is he's in charge of EM. He has EM1, but forgive me, sir, I forget your senior technical advisor for, thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. So I won't take a whole lot of your meeting time. I just wanted to, since I was here in northern New Mexico today, and I knew you guys were meeting today, just wanted an opportunity to drop by and make sure that all of you understand just how much I appreciate the public service that all of you are engaged in providing our program input and perspective on the impact our program has, and the concerns you have about our program, and the priorities that you would have for our program. On behalf of the communities where all of you live and the folks that all of you work with. I think when you think about the construct of what we're doing from a cleanup program and why we're doing what we're doing, we clean up and we run the program on behalf of all of the folks who could be affected by that cleanup. And it is very important to us to be able to hear from the perspectives of folks who might be impacted from that cleanup. We obviously can't go out and meet with tens of thousands of people on a regular basis, and it really helps us to have a smaller forum of folks who are really interested, want to take the time to come up to speed on the various details associated with the program, have an exchange, have a conversation, and provide thoughtful feedback to us on ways that we can improve and do better. It's a public service that all of you are engaged in. I know we don't pay you. And so the fact that you are all willing to spend your valuable time giving us input to help us make the program better is very much appreciated by me. And I just wanted an opportunity to tell you personally how much I appreciate your service in that regard, and to thank you for it, and to say that we all look forward to continuing to work with you as we continue to work through developing what our program looks like over the next couple of decades. And with that, I think I will, leave it to Michael and Brad to talk about the details of the program. But maybe if you're interested, I can spend a few minutes and take questions if folks have them or just want to engage. I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Ike. That would be excellent if you could stay and answer some of our questions or just talk. So Michael, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Actually, why don't we open the floor if there were some questions for Ike? After he just spoke, let's take a little time if the CAB members have any questions or anything they'd like to talk about. Let's do that before I have my remarks. I'll condense my remarks appropriately.
Okay. Beverly, please.
So there has been some discussion in this group as to why are we just northern New Mexico? Is because there's a separate field office in Carlsbad? Why is the CAB not for the whole state?
I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, normally we have scoped our Citizens Advisory Board specifically around the folks who are impacted by that scope of work. And so for EMLA, the CAB is directly tied to our cleanup program here at Los Alamos, and so we sort of do that. I don't I'm certainly open to conversations more broadly on what the membership of the CAB looks like. But, historically, what we've done for each of our sites is establish advisory boards specifically tied to the scope of cleanup at the site where we have the advisory board.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. Mark?
Thank you, Elena, and thank you, Mike, for coming and spending the valuable time you have with us. Last time I saw you was in DC, and I appreciate you addressing us then. I'm going to tag on to Beverly's question a little bit and say that because of our mission being an outreach purpose for the public, all the other CABs throughout the nation, the 7 other CABs other than us, have jurisdiction over the entire state. Do you see a reason, and would DOE support this CAB, since our charter doesn't allow it apparently, including the rest of New Mexico in our jurisdiction?
Not knowing the details of the charter here, I think I'll point out a couple of things. One, the advisory boards are generally tied to cleanup sites, right? So EM sites. So the department's use of the advisory boards falls under the cleanup program typically, and New Mexico is the only state I'm aware of where we have multiple sites from the cleanup perspective within the same state. So that makes it somewhat unique, because we're still tied to the cleanup program. So I don't have an easy answer to your question. I think if this is something of interest, I'm certainly happy to have our folks continue to have an engagement with you on the subject. I can certainly see different perspectives on that question.
I appreciate that. And I do note that the transuranic waste comes from Los Alamos all the way down to Carlsbad, some 300 miles. Right. It should be part of the oversight, would be my opinion.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Beverly, you still have your card up? Okay, Jim, please.
I'm going to do tag team on this. First of all, thanks for coming. And I think we put you in a tough spot. We don't expect you to answer that question. But I think it's a great question. One of the unique things about New Mexico, I believe, is the context we have with the history of Los Alamos and the fact that Highway 599 was built specifically to route, as I understand it, to route the trucks around the city to get them down to WIP. With all that, I think we haven't sampled this CAB particularly on the subject, but I think it would be great if we had a real good discussion and make a recommendation to you all about taking over that responsibility. I think it's time now.
I would certainly be interested in the CAB's input on that, and I don't mind hard questions. The fact that I don't have easy answers doesn't mean that the question isn't a good one. And I get paid to get hard questions, so I'm certainly okay with that. I don't actually have an easy answer for you on this one. I understand the perspective. I haven't really thought it through myself, and so I can't give you an easy answer. And there may be challenges and difficulties that I certainly need to think through. But I think hearing your perspective and what you would think and having a discussion on it is something that would be worthwhile.
Thank you. So I quickly, you were here, 2 years ago, I believe?
Sometimes time seems so elastic.
It was a quick visit, and we had a similar discussion. I think Mark was there and Bob Hull. And we had discussed at least opening up the CAB participation membership down the corridor to WIP, and I understand that WIP itself, the community does not want to have, at least that's what I've heard, if somebody could clarify, does not want to have an advisory board over them. And then Sandia's advisory board closed because that project is closed. So if it's possible to open up membership, at least down the corridor, the Rio Grande corridor or the truck route corridor, because that does affect those people going south. And then engaging higher ed, academia, having representatives from our higher ed institutions. What do you think about that?
I mean, maybe I'll toss this to Michael. You may have put more thought into this than I have.
A little bit. So here's what I can offer to you on this. I liked Ike solicited, he said he welcomes some CAB feedback on that. So I'll work with the DDFO and we can take a look at the work plan and make an adjustment. Let's add this as a topic the Department of Energy would like your thoughts and feedback on. I'll also have our DDFO work with the designated federal official up in headquarters, which is responsible for all the different citizens advisory boards, and have a dialogue on that. And we'll include that in the work plan to hear what y'all think, and we'll bring some of the feedback we get from the discussions with headquarters. I don't have the full history on this. I am aware that at one point, usually these are very site-specific citizens advisory boards. The normal approach would be to have one for WIP and one for here. But if Carlsbad didn't want to have the community, not the field office, didn't want to have a citizens advisory board, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to participate if they don't feel that they want to do that. I will note, Mark, I'm going to pick on a word you said because you used the word oversight. The CAB doesn't oversee the Department of Energy. Our relationship is unique and different than that. You advise us. It's a collaborative relationship where we bring topics and questions and issues that we want the CAB to go look at as active citizens, like I described. And because it is a volunteer service, you come to the table as well as we build the work plans of, hey, here are some of the things that we'd like to know a little bit more about because we might have a couple thoughts we'd want you to consider. It's not an oversight role, so whenever this word comes up, I take a moment out to draw a distinction because oversight is like what my friends at the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board do. They oversee the Department of Energy, and that's a completely different kind of relationship than we have with the Citizens Advisory Board. So I'm not trying to pick on you, Mark, but I just wanted to clarify that because we've got members of the public and others who watch our discussions. So we'll take that action to have the DDFO discussion, and we'll work with the chair to go back and look at their work plan, whether we try to fit it in this year or first thing next year. We'll get that going.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, if we could have that discussion, I would welcome that very much. And Joseph, you had your hand up.
Yes, ma'am. Wow, that's some good conversation there. This collaboration thing is, I really take it at heart. And I really take it at heart that both of you gentlemen you really want to have a really good table talk conversation. It's very, very needed. It's badly needed. We need that good engagement. New Mexico, as we all know, is a nuclear industry state. We know that what's going on in Carlsbad. We know what's going on with that controversial issue with Hotech International. We know what's going on with all that nuclear material that's in our state that's traveling along our interstates, that going in between our tribal nations, going in between our communities left and right. It all complements each other one way or the other when it comes to the public safety and the welfare and the health of our community in New Mexico. We know what the politics is all about, even all the way to headquarters in D.C. involving DOE and DFO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that collaboration, I'll hold both of you right there accountable for, if you really want to have a conversation, let's have the conversation and let's be straight up and do the right thing for New Mexico and do the right thing for our communities and take care of what's the best interest of New Mexico. And I appreciate the conversation, so I'm looking forward to it. And with CAB, and that jurisdiction thing is so important. It really is. And believe me, I know the history. I know the full history of what's going on in Carlsbad, New Mexico, and why they don't want to have a citizens advisory board, et cetera, et cetera. I know the history. I wasn't born yesterday. I don't think none of us were born yesterday, right? I think we just need to be straightforward and be honest and say, mira, look, this is what's happening. Let's work together in resolving and finding some kind of a good answer for everybody to be at ease and no friction. I don't like that friction stuff, man. It doesn't cut it. So let's work together like a family, right? You know, like a family, we are family, like but anyways, that's my say so. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Joseph. Stephen?
I had a quick question about WIP, if you can shed some light on that. It started out as a pilot plant, now seems well on its way to becoming a permanent repository. Is there a second site being considered? Where does that process stand?
So one of the things that you know, from a repository perspective, the thing that set it up originally is the Land Withdrawal Act, right? And that set a limit for the amount of waste that we can place in WIP, right? And that's a statutory limit. I mean, the limit is what the limit is. Now, there is some, you know, how quickly we reach that limit in large part depends on how quickly we operate different transuranic disposal and waste generation streams around the country, right? So our estimates of exactly how long that's going to take have fluctuated and will continue to fluctuate as those programs ramp up and down and we look at how effective they are. And so one of the things that I think that we need to do and are very interested in doing is engaging with all of the folks who would be impacted and talking about what happens when we reach the Land Withdrawal Act limit. Because I do think we need at some point to start planning for that. One of the things that we agreed to do recently, I think with the state, was to begin to do that planning process in a way that also made it public. So I'm looking forward to those discussions as we do that.
Any more questions or comments from our members in the room or anyone online? Now's your chance.
I really don't mind hard questions.
Oh, okay then. Oh, yes, go ahead, Beverly, please.
Would you consider the cleanup at Lannel to be a priority of EM compared to other sites, other EM sites?
That's a good question. It's sort of like asking, when you ask someone in my position this question, right? It's like asking me which of my children I love the best, right? Because all of our cleanup has priorities for different reasons, right? And so I think there are aspects of the cleanup program within different sites that all have priority. I mean, I think we've reached the point across the program where we've triaged the immediate hazards that had existed back when this thing started 3 decades ago, right? And what we're talking about now are getting to the point where everybody's comfortable with long-term solutions. In some places, those are things that can be done over the space of the next 10 to 15 years. In other places, those are things that might take 60 to 80 years or even longer. But I think it's not a matter of doing this one or that one. I think we need to be doing all of them, right? And so I don't think of it as a priority of one site over the other site. I think of it as a priority of all the various work streams that we have ongoing and seeing how to keep them all balanced, because all of these collectively constitute a very significant program across the country, and there are risks and issues we have to deal with everywhere. So anyway, yes.
Thank you. Okay. No, I am not giving you a dirty look.
Yes.
I would not do that.
Yes.
Please, and then we'll move on to Michael. There you go. Thank you.
Okay. Are you going to watch the movie?
Right. Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I love the most about the cleanup program, other than the fact that it's nice to be passionate about and involved in something that means so much to so many people, but I also happen to be a fan of history, and I spent a lot of my career with NNSA, and the interesting thing about that is you're really in that program mostly looking forward. It's not about what happened previously, it's about what you're going to do over the next 10 or 20 years. As we do cleanup, there's so much opportunity to learn what happened over the last, for good or bad in some cases. But it's interesting, right? And so I've been reading the book, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing the movie. As a matter of fact, I'm going to a screening tomorrow night, I think.
Well, it's a semi-serious question, because I think for all of us, understand, I'm just old enough that I kind of remember the end of the war, but for all of us to understand collectively what got us to this point, I think is pretty well covered in that movie, and so I think we ought to all go watch it.
Well, I mean, I think I think all of us benefit from understanding our history, acknowledging the facts of what it was, whatever those were, and doing our best to learn from those facts for good and bad, right? And so the question is, can we all do that? And I think this movie presents another opportunity for us to have those kinds of conversations and learn from those things.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you for your participation, Ike.
Well, and thank all of you again. I really did mean it when I said how much I appreciated the fact that you're all willing to do this. Do we have one more question from? Or we have time?
Quickly.
Yeah, this will be super quick. And I think you're a stand-in for Oppenheimer if you had the right hat. But aside from that,
I thought about whether I should wear because I'm getting bald and the New Mexico sun tends to wreak havoc on the top of my head, so I could have used one for my site tours tomorrow anyway.
But this is all about simplicity. For 3 or so years, I've been asking for a chart, and it seems to me that it's a really good snapshot for the public to digest it. If you have any expertise you can share with us on how to make a chart that would show the progress, when the duration is over, when the end game is, and how much it costs, we'd love to do that here.
If you guys, one of the things I would actually appreciate advice from you as we talk to you about the cleanup program at large, because this is some feedback that I've gotten not just from you but from others as well, both over the course of my trip so far today, in a couple of different forums, and also in general in the past. And when you're dealing with a program of really technical people who are focused around difficult work, their expertise often is not, and mine is not, how to communicate effectively, right? And so we often struggle with how to do that effectively. And so I think, Michael and I talked this morning, I think we're going to start, as part of our vision effort, start working on exactly what you just said. And so one of the things that I would appreciate as feedback from all of you is how well we're doing and what is useful and what is not useful, and be candid. Right? I mean, it doesn't do us a lot of good to generate data that people look at and say, well, I don't understand what that means. And even if I did, what's the point of that, right? And to really get to the data that you're interested in seeing that we can talk to. So I think that's a good suggestion. I've heard it from several sources. I think we're going to try to take it to heart. And my only ask is that you understand it'll be a evolutionary process as we make it better and better, and that your candid feedback will be very helpful in that regard.
Thank you, great question, and thank you for your. 36. Okay, so quickly, as a reminder, we have the Environmental Management Cleanup Forum tomorrow at Fuller Lodge from 9 to 10:30. I also will be there because I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. And Ike, of course, Ike will be there presenting. So please, if you can, make it. If not, there is also a hybrid option at Fuller Lodge, and I believe there's more information. It was emailed to members. Please check your email, and if you can't travel, there is a hybrid option, a WebEx. And with that, Michael, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will try to condense what I had quite a bit of information I wanted to share with you. You also gave me a couple topics you wanted updates on, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. Thank you, Ike, for joining us today, and I look forward to the opportunity to have this discussion with the members of the CAB and any members of the public that are observing us today. I wanted to begin with addressing an opportunity for improvement that I heard from the CAB. And I think it was my very first meeting that I joined you in. I believe it was September of 2021, where the CAB asked, hey, what can the department do regarding a website? And we're about ready to, I just want to share with you, our team has developed a beta website, a beta site for the CAB members to try out. The Public Outreach Subcommittee is getting feedback from the members to provide some input for the final layout that SNK, my contractor, is developing it. We'll use to finalize I say finalize, it'll be an evolving thing over time. But we're going to continue to get photos from you to add to the website, presentations. We're going to have links to the videos that we are now recording. Again, another opportunity for improvement that the CAB mentioned. Why aren't we recording these things? So I'm really excited to share that we've made progress. is not as easy as I had hoped it would be to build a website. I'm learning that because I'm doing 2 of them, and that's the other thing I'll share since we were talking about demonstrating progress. By the end of September, I'm going to roll out an enhancement to our EMLA website. This is going to be a dashboard. It's actually going to, I'm envisioning it to be an interactive map that you can bring up. It'll show like the aggregate areas. You know, we've briefed you all before. There's hundreds and hundreds of areas of concerns and solid waste management units grouped into aggregate areas and then rolled up under campaigns and things. It'll be a visually driven thing that you can click on and drive down through layers. We're going to do it in phase. I'm going to come out with the Yugo model of it first, and we'll, instead of the Cadillac version right away, or longer down the road. And the idea is to be able to, that it'll be able to show progress, not on a month-to-month basis because things just don't change that dynamically. But I hope that'll be the kind of tool. And in next year's work plan, I would like to add that as an action that we would like to have the CAB take a look at and give us some feedback and recommendations on what parts work and what parts don't work. So really excited to share with you that we're going to be rolling out the CAB's website here very soon. And at the end of the year, I expect to have a significant enhancement to our own EMLA website as well. I also want to share some other accomplishments. In April of this year, we began option period 1. That's the 6th year of a potential 10-year contract we have with N3B. Last month, I signed out the letter authorizing operations of the new corrugated metal pipe size reduction process. That began at the end of June. We've already processed 2 of those corrugated metal pipes, and we're starting out in a very deliberative manner. So we gain proficiency, and the team builds confidence doing the hot operations. I anticipate that that campaign will be complete at the end of March of next year. And when that work is done, and then it's going to take time to put it through certification and characterization. But at the end of that process, that should represent a little bit over 130 shipments to WIP of transuranic material. A lot of processing in the next 6 months. And now that we've awarded option period 1 to N3B, I'm looking forward to putting additional processing capabilities that will allow us to get into the more difficult waste, most of which is remaining, which most of the above ground storage is the more difficult waste, and then the waste that is entombed underground that we'll be excavating, the shafts, the trenches, pit 9 that you've heard about. In the past 2 years, shifting to the environmental remediation side, we've made good progress in the aggregate area campaigns. We've completed 2 aggregate area campaigns so far, and we're nearing completion of a 3rd. N3B is now investigated and remediated where necessary more than 50% of the contaminated legacy waste sites, not on the aggregate as whole. That means I got 50% of the job to go still. A lot of work to go. In technical area 21, we're characterizing the holdup of radioactive waste that in the last remaining above ground structure, building 257, and the industrial waste lines underneath. As soon as we get that characterized, then it'll allow us to move into deactivation, demolition of the remaining above ground structure and the waste lines. And then that allows us later in the contract to get into the foundations that are remaining and the different potential contaminated sites in the soil. So a lot of work in Area 21 to go. And I'm also happy to share that we're very, very close to awarding a contract for a new D&D project of the ion beam facility up on the lab. I really can't, we're near the end of the acquisition process for that, so I really can't provide a whole lot of details to that, but that's an exciting new challenging project. DOE will be managing that directly rather than through N3B, but that's another piece of work that we'll be getting started on this year. You asked me to come and talk to you a little bit about where we are with the strategic vision. We've completed most of the phase 1 and phase 2 engagements. You all volunteered to be, there's my South Carolina accent creeping back up on me again, forgive me. You all volunteered to be the beta test for the process. We've now completed all but 4 groups, and we're winding those last 4 groups into this. After that, we'll be moving into phase 3. I would invite the Citizens Advisory Board, as we nail down the dates for that, to please participate, come and observe the town hall meeting that I kind of described, where we're going to take all the values and the objectives and the priorities that we've heard in phase 2. We're processing that through software that we have that'll help us produce, if you will, guidelines, guidance that we'll be using to make the cleanup decisions. And then the latter half of phase 3 is where we have that town hall meeting I shared with y'all, where we get together, you watch the Department of Energy put together the strategic vision in front of the public. When we'll take breaks, just like we do in the board meetings here, for the public to come forward and give us their thoughts on what they're seeing. And so I look forward to giving you a little bit more detail on that as my contractor lays out the details of this, but we're very close to getting that schedule in place, and I really do hope you'll come and watch that as your schedules will allow. Finally, I'd like to shift my focus to EMLA's top remediation project, the hexavalent chromium plume in Mortandad Canyon. I'm not going to give you the background of, we've talked about the hexavalent chromium plume many times, but I think I'll start in giving my update. I want to review some of the highlights of what we've accomplished under the first campaign, which is the interim measure operation, while we gain sufficient characterization information to propose a remedy. Since we started up the interim measure in April of 2018, we've processed it and run it through March of this year. We've processed 468 million gallons of chromium contaminated water in the aquifer, treated it and re-injected it. That's the equivalent of 709 Olympic-sized swimming pools. A lot of volume of water in those 5 years. And through that process, we've removed about 700 pounds of chromium from the water. It's very dilute. Almost 500 million gallons, and you get 700 pounds of chromium. That's not bad, since the interim measure wasn't designed to be a removal process. It was designed to be the hydraulic barrier that contains it into the Llano website. I really look forward to the day when we can actually propose a remedy and get into the serious mass removal that a final remedy would be proposing. But thanks to the operation of that interim measure, we were able to push the 50 parts per million boundary, which is right on the edge of San Ildefonso's boundary with the lab, back 500 feet. And I'll share with you, while we shut down part of the system for corrective maintenance late last year, we continued to operate it partially through the end of March of this year. And the data that we have shows that we reduced the chromium contamination that was previously above 50 parts per billion in a critical well. That gives us an indication we may have pushed the boundary from October of last year to March, several hundred feet further away from the San Ildefonso boundary before the system was completely shut down. That's good news. I've shared that news with the county, with the Pueblo de San Ildefonso, and Pueblo de San Ildefonso is obviously happy that we've continued to make progress while we were operating the system to drive that plume farther away from the part of their aquifer that's under their lands. With respect to the county is also concerned about the chromium plume. We have 2 Sentinel wells right next to the county well that is the source of drinking water for Los Alamos County. None of those Sentinel wells, if you will, they're several hundred feet away from where the county's well supply is, have detected any chromium. The closest monitoring well that does have chromium is R70. It's quite a distance away. It was reading earlier in the operation of the interim measure. It was reading very high levels of chromium, and the last time we took a measurement, we had reduced the chromium content in R70 by 50%. So the operation of the interim measure, and this is where our extraction well number 5, chromium extraction well number 5, we call CREX 5. The operation of the extraction and the injection has managed to drive the concentration in R70 down by 50%. And that's good news as well for the county. We want to really contain that plume while we get to the point where we can propose a remedy with the state of New Mexico. I've mentioned in the past that in an earlier discussion we had that in November and December of last year, we received regulatory direction to that eventually culminated in the complete shutdown of the interim measure. The direction was to no longer, and not to resume operation of 6 injection and extraction wells, and then the second direction was to not operate any more injection wells, which means the extraction all had to stop, as we've discussed in the past. While we weren't consulted, and neither was the Pueblo before the regulatory direction, we have worked with the state, and we've shared our technical basis, our calculations, maps, modeling that we have, technical reports. The state has been very open and receptive. We've had a number of summits discussing this. We've invited Pueblo de San Ildefonso to join those summits to discuss this, and the options for trying to find a solution that's acceptable to both my regulator and the Department of Energy for our responsibility to ensure that we're still containing the plume under as required by the consent order. There's still work to be done on that. We're now bringing I know there's work being done to invite the Office of the State Engineer to join those discussions as well, because they have a regulatory role in how the design of the wells are that we put in. They give us the permits to insert them. So do we use 1 screen or 2 screens? They're joining those discussions as well. We haven't hit a point yet where we have a solution. There are a couple schools of thought on that, and I think I've given you an overview of the 2 options. Whether, the Department of Energy has a bias for action. We would like to move into remedy as soon as possible. The state would like to see some more immediate actions done with the interim measure to move the injection outwards and allow the extraction wells to start up. And we continue to work to try to find something that will resolve the state's concerns as well as meet my concerns, that whatever operations we have need to still be protective of the plume not moving to tribal lands, containing it on site while we do move to a final remedy. We've met separately with Pueblo de San Ildefonso to share our technical basis and the prognosis on what we're doing. We've likewise met with the county. And in the meantime, we will continue to work collaboratively with our regulator to try to find the negotiated actions that could be offered and taken by the department to allow resumption of the interim measure again, because it's extremely important to ensure that we don't allow that plume to move back closer to the San Ildefonso boundary and damage their natural resources. That's a condensed version of what I had to share with you all today. I think it better not have taken me 30 minutes. I was shorter than that.
You're good.
Good. God, you guys, the looks you were giving me, I'm thinking, God, did I go over 30 minutes?
No, I was getting.
No, it was
wasn't
15 minutes. So with that, Madam Chair, if you want to have some questions, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm a little bit behind schedule. You tell me what you would like to do, ma'am.
Thank you, Michael. That was short and sweet. And so, just a moment. What we're going to do, hang, Jim, I got you. No, please. What we're going to do is we'll take questions from our board, and then we're going to jump to NMED for their update, and then we'll move to Brad. Fine. Take it.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. Size aside. Jim, please.
I just have one question. Michael, I'm a fan of your strategic vision, in case you don't know. And we went to the convention center here a while back, and I think you were there too, when the county commissioner for Santa Fe had a forum. And when you start talking about what you're going to do in the next phase, what I heard from the audience in that particular meeting was a whole lot of concern at what I'll call 50,000 feet, which means it never got around to what we're all concerned with necessarily. It was around the larger picture of should we be in nuclear production, et cetera, et cetera. And I think you probably heard the same thing. So my question is, how are you going to deal with that as you go on?
Good question, Jim. Thank you for that. When we assemble the strategic vision in phase 3, as I mentioned, this will be the phase 2 and phase 1 was very interactive and participatory. It was intended to be. That's where we're soliciting and doing the engagement. Phase 3 is going to be more observational, because typically what the Department of Energy or any federal agency really does when we do the planning is, if we do a community engagement, we'll get the thoughts and ideas, but then we go put the plans in place. There's leadership and other groups that we'll talk to, and then when we're done, we unveil it for the public. We're doing something different here. This is, the innovative part is you're going to watch me, and there's some risk to me doing this, and it's different. We're going to have to do some sausage making up front, processing the feedback we're going to get from you all and putting it together in something that I can actually use to assemble it. It's not going to be a theater. We're going to do enough of the work and cost estimating, et cetera, to be able to assemble something in front of you all, but it's not, we're not going to be presenting the 50,000 foot stuff. We're going to be actually laying out, here's the priorities and sequences and how I'll address it. When we take the breaks and get the feedback from folks, if folks want to comment on 50,000 feet, things that aren't associated with my mission, they're welcome to do that, just like they are here. I'm not going to control public comment when, particularly during FACA. FACA has rules. You can comment on anything you want to. And when we do the strategic vision, we'll make sure that folks who are observing understand that the strategic vision is associated with the Office of Environmental Management's Legacy Waste Cleanup mission. But if people want to offer comments, that's fine, but I'm listening for the comments as I assemble it in the town hall format, if you will, where people can watch in person or virtually. I'm listening for those comments and feedbacks. If folks think that we're missing something or we're off track or we didn't consider something, it gives them an opportunity to get their thoughts. And after we listen to that, maybe we'll regroup and have a discussion right afterwards. That's part of the concept of the structure that I'm laying out, to be able to go back and listen to it. That's how I plan on dealing with it. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it's going to be hard.
As we've listened in phase 2, I have 180-degree opposing opinions and thoughts from folks. When I entered into this, I was under no delusion that this was going to be an easy thing to do. If this was easy, I would have had my pet dog put the thing together. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult. And, at the end of the day, my objective is not to make everybody happy. My objective is to have the folks who participate look at the product, see how their thoughts and input was considered, and say at the end of the day, I'll declare this a success, when they can look and say, okay, I didn't get everything I wanted, or the department wasn't able to accommodate everything I wish they could have, but I can live with what they put together. That would be my definition of success. It added to that, as we built relationships and strengthened the trust and transparency that my field office has with the community, my elected officials, tribal nations, non-governmental organizations, et cetera.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Michael and Jim. And just quickly for the public who may not know, FACA is the Federal Advisory Committee Act, and I'm always very careful how I say that acronym. Mark?
Thank you, Elena. This is hopefully a simple question with a simple answer. I'm excited to hear that you've driven back the chromium plume 500 feet. I took a tour, but I didn't see it, so I'm hoping you can explain a little bit visually for me. How do you know it moved back 500 feet?
Thank you, Mark. That is a good question. I could bring in a hydrologist and several others, and we could glaze your eyes over in about 3 hours. But the short answer is we have groundwater wells that were previously detecting levels of chromium, and after we operate the hydraulic barrier for those years, the chromium levels went down. And the example of one where I think we pushed it several hundred feet, maybe as much as 500 beyond the 500, a total of 1,000. And I've got a map I'll be happy to show you after we're done, after the meeting's over today. I think I have it with me. One of the chromium levels in CREX 1, the extraction well number 1, had been previously above 50 parts per billion last September. And as we operated the 2 remaining extraction and injection wells in October, November, December, January, February, or March, the chromium went below 50, and it's now around 25 or 30. So there's a lot of uncertainty when you have data rich over years in one location, but not geographically diverse locations that you can sample from. There's a lot more uncertainty because the tighter the wells are together, the more data you have geographically, and it's easier, you reduce the uncertainty. So there's some uncertainty with that, but the scientists who do this kind of stuff for a living, that goes into our calculations, that mapping, the technical basis that we have. I have a hand-drawn map right now that shows it was pushed back a ways. That I'm not advertising, we pushed it back 1,000 feet now. I'm advertising the reduction in the extraction well number 1's chromium levels is indicative that we've continued, the hydraulic barriers continue to push the chromium plume back to the north a little bit further. I'd want to run this through our model a little bit more to get more certainty than the hand-drawn maps that my scientists have put together for me. But it's positive. I hope that was the short answer you're looking for.
A little bit longer, but I look forward to seeing the maps and that turbo blade from the Warhawk.
Well, I've come to my office sometime. I've got 3 of them, and it's almost physically impossible for me to talk on a scientific question and keep it really, really short, but I try. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Michael. Let's move on. If NMED would like to present, I do have to let you know we have a hard stop at 4:15 for public comment, and then we can continue after that. You can continue after that. So Rick Sheehan, did I pronounce that? Okay, is from New Mexico Environment Department and has a new title. So if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone, Madam Chair, members. My name is Rick Sheen. I'm the Resource Protection Division Director at the Environment Department. Hazardous Waste Bureau is one of the bureaus within the division. As Secretary Kenny and the department really appreciate this permanent spot you put on the agenda for us. So we do appreciate the opportunity to come and give us what we're doing for the Lannel site. And WIP. Also, as a regular attendee, if you do bring in Carlsbad, could you not hold the summer meetings in Carlsbad? I just put that out there, get it on the record. Appreciate that.
Rick,
yes.
we're all guilty of this. Could we speak a little bit louder into the microphone?
Yes.
Thank you.
That better?
So the people
Thank
in the
you.
back can hear.
No,
Thank you. It's not just you.
First, with the Lannel update, I'll give you an update on the groundwater activities that NMED hazardous waste site are doing. R73 is being plugged and abandoned with oversight from the Environment Department and the State Engineer's Office. The well was plugged above the water table, but while pulling on it, there were some problems with some of the hydraulics with the rigs. So they were taken away for repairs for about 2 to 4 weeks, but we continue to receive updates from N3B. And just so you know, this readout, everything happened since we met last. So I'll give you an idea of timing. There's a notice of disapproval sent for the chromium interim measure and characterization work plan. And we expect DOE to respond by the end of this month. And we do have planned a meeting this week to go over with them before they submit it. We've approved modifications of a drilling plan for R76 since we last met. And also, we've toured a potential site for new monitoring well at the Pueblo de San Ildefonso, meeting with their Environment Department and their cultural preservation staff to discuss proposed well locations for the chromium plume. As Michael mentioned, the IM for the chromium plume has been shut down since April 1st, as we're still sort of as an impasse and on agreement. But NMED is currently waiting on a proposal for alternative injection locations from DOE, so we can continue the extraction and reinjection of the water sooner than later. We have reviewed an annual progress report for the plume, and we've also reviewed a fate and transport modeling and revised risk assessment for the RDX contamination. Although currently we're really focusing on the chromium plume at this time. However, the characterization will be conducted before a risk of the RDX plume can be evaluated. Middle DP road site contamination. DOE is still conducting field investigations and collecting their confirmation samples, and NMED still waits for a completion of the work and a final report to review. As far as the permit goes, this has been mentioned previous meetings. The application was submitted in 2020. We have sent 2 administrative incomplete determinations to DOE since, and we're currently waiting for DOE to submit a revised application that includes an additional storage unit. There's also, DOE submitted earlier this year a resubmittal of a renewal application. Let's see. Sorry, Neelam and I rewrite notes together. She writes the notes and I try to read them and don't do so well. She knows probably exactly what it says. So we've postponed, a renewal application is postponed until a Class 2 permit modification to add the storage unit at technical area 60 is approved. So changes in storage units are reflected correctly in the application that we received. Also earlier this year, they submitted a Class 2 permit mod for the addition of a hazardous waste management unit at TA 60, and we have sent an administrative incomplete letter since we last met. We received public comments during the comment period review from DOE, at which seismic concerns were raised in the comments, as NNMCAB is currently working with DOE to resolve the issues. As far as the consent order goes, proposed FY24 Appendix B is due to NNMCAB this month, and we will plan to review the proposal and start discussions with DOE to finalize it. We do like to provide you a WIP update, even if CBFO is not currently involved. As far as the WIP, and this is actually bright news, WIP permit renewal. Environment Department, permittees, and the stakeholders successfully negotiated a settlement agreement for the 10-year renewal during the week of June 20th through 23rd. This removed because 2 parties that filed that they wanted a hearing. They withdrew their hearing, and so we have freed up our summer. So we're calling this the Miracle WIP Summer, which is great. There's a public notice announcing a public meeting will be issued on August 15th, 2023. Again, we will hold a hybrid public meeting on September 22nd, 2023 on WebEx and in Santa Fe and Carlsbad to go over details and allow the public to ask their questions and comments. We believe the final permit to be issued early October 2023, and with an effective date 30 days after in early November. As far as the WIP shipments go, total shipments as of January 1st, there's been 252. WIP received 185 from Idaho National Lab, 33 from Lannel, 18 from the Savannah River site, 11 from Oak Ridge, and 5 from the Argonne National Lab in Illinois. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Really appreciate it. Let's see. Beverly?
That sounds like a huge workload for the state. My question was, in the past, there's been a large backlog of documents waiting to be reviewed. Is that still the case? And do you have plans to attack those?
Yes, I do. And I'll let Neelam, as she looks over Michael's shoulder, to answer that. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, we have met the backlog. We are pretty much now on track. But there are some documents, especially associated with chromium, which are very complex, and it's taking time to get our comments to DOE and set up meetings to resolve them. But yeah, we have actually caught up on quite a bit of backlog because we've had some steady staff for last couple of years. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Thank you, Neelam. And Marty, please.
Thank you. This actually is a question for you, Neelam, and maybe also for Michael. I was wondering, with the stoppage that you had to institute for the chromium plume interim measure, how stable do you think the gains are that you've made while this is in cessation? Is there any any movement of the plume closer to the Pueblo boundary.
So Neem, do you want to go first? You want me to
I can go. I can
You
go
can revise and extend my remarks.
Yeah, you've heard
So-
Mike talk about chromium plume, but I would say we don't know at this point. You know, you had asked a question about plume having moved 500 feet. We're just basing it on data from extraction wells, but we keep in mind we are injecting close to them. So we don't know how much the reduction in the concentrations is impacted by the injection of treated water. So yes, we have a lot of data gaps in this area because real estate is very limited there. So we cannot have too many wells out there, but we are trying to do our best. So, we've been meeting regularly on chromium because as it is with DOE, it's with NMED also our priority. And we meet monthly. We have technical meetings, our technical staff and theirs. So we have identified at least 4 groundwater wells. And then, Rick mentioned R73 ran into some problems, and that's pushed the schedule back till they wanted to wait till they figure out what went wrong with R73. So we are very keen because at this point we have one well on Simmer 2 on Sinai property on the southern side. And we don't think it's probably the best location for it. So Simmer 3 is the other one which we are planning, and we will prioritize that over other data gap wells. And Sinai has nicely agreed to let us drill a well on their property. So we are waiting to get that data. And as Mike was mentioning, the DOE is keen on resuming the shutdown of IAM. But we would like to get the data from Sinai property to have confidence to see, because the main point of contention between us and DOE is the treated water right now, all the injection wells are within the plume. So we have a concern that we are putting treated water on top of the contaminated zones and spreading it around. And so we basically shut down the injections. And we've been asking DOE to come up with alternate locations. And DOE is ready to go on to remedy. And NMED's position is we don't have enough. We right now don't know the vertical extent. When R70 was drilled, we did not think that R70, the screen 2 turned out to be more contaminated than screen 1. So we didn't know at that time that the contamination was deeper than what we thought. So R73 was supposed to answer that question, and as I mentioned, that ran into some problems. We actually maybe created communication between top contaminated screen and the bottom screen. So all these wells we have talked about are going to investigate the deeper portions of the plume. So NMED is not in a position to, because we get to select the remedy. They make the proposal, as I mentioned earlier, we get to select. We are not in a position to select a remedy with such incomplete information. So hopefully after we get these 4 data wells in, maybe we can move forward. And we really don't, it goes back to the discussion I had with Beverly about interim measures and final remedy. And cleanup of chromium is a long-term thing. 600 or 700 pounds, Michael mentioned, is out of 160,000 pounds, which we assume has been, released. So we want DOE to stay in IAM, enhanced IAM, drill some extra extraction wells, drill some extra injection wells outside the plume, and keep going till we have better understanding of going full-fledged with a full remedy, and which is called final remedy because statement of basis calls it final remedy, but it isn't really a final remedy because we may need some additional amendments or something which we haven't. A couple of amendment pilot studies were done and they were not successful, but maybe there's something else that needs to be done along with pump and treat to do it. So that's where we are. Sorry, Michael.
So your question, I think, was regarding the stability of the current situation. I'll answer it in 2 contexts. Near term, I think it's going to be it's stable. I've we chartered a study by N3B to go back and look at our model and tell me what happens 3, 6, 9, 12 months with no injection, no extraction. I have the preliminary results back on that yet. I haven't seen them. I've been briefed on them. We'll look at that. But in terms of the months, we haven't seen any significant rebound yet. I have data from May. I think the June is coming in, but it takes weeks to analyze the data once we've pulled it and sent it off to the laboratory. So we'll have to see. My guess as an engineer and scientist, I'll qualify that I have an environmental engineering degree, but I'm not a hydrologist, is that in the short term it'll be stable. Long term, no. Groundwater's going to move. It's going to damage the aquifer, whether you contain it on lab property and hold it back. I mean, water's got to go somewhere. Or if you turn everything off, it's going to move back again. How long it'll take, I'm hoping that study will give me some insights. The process that Neelam is talking to go get the data from Simmer 3, the new well that San Ildefonso has agreed to allow to be installed on tribal lands. That is projected once we work through the administration of, design, all the regulatory approvals, tribal approvals. We're probably going to get that installed and operational September of next year. If we can get the administrative part of it earlier, I will swap it in. It is the priority for new wells because it fills some data gaps. That's a year from now. So no, I won't tell you that the plume, as we've pushed it back now, will remain stable over that period or longer. And I can't, anyway, I won't rehash the differences between remedy and a super IM, except I'll just say I don't want to create a super IM that is de facto a remedy if injection and extraction and cleanup is going to, pump and treat is going to be the remedy. Let's get on with the remedy. And that's what we're working with our regulator on. There's still work to be done. We've got differences here, but I can assure you the federal agency and the state agency, and I'm speaking for you, Neelam, you can feel free to tell me if I'm wrong, but we both have the interest of the residents and of the local communities and the tribal nations' interest at heart. And that's why we're at the table working, and that's why we've invited them to be a part of this, so that they can see that this is the actual essence of consultation when we bring them in. So we're working on that. And I haven't reached the point, I brief my boss, I brief Ike every month and then quarterly with my site briefings, and this is a topic that we talk about. So we're paying very close attention to the stability. That is on the front of my mind, and that's why we're working hard with the state. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Neelam. Let me just check with Beverly before I get to you, Mark. Did I skip over you? Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Mark, please.
Thank you, Elaine. I got two parts for NMED to respond to. One is, when will NMED have an evaluation on the MDAH site after you receive comments? And then secondly, as consent order chair, I ask this all the time, and I always get the same answer. But how close are we to getting a rewrite of the consent order?
Can't respond to that since it's in litigation.
That's the same answer. It's pretty consistent.
So your first comment was on MDAH. MDAH is something LANL is in the planning process. We have not received the corrective measures evaluation. Once we get it, as I said, about 15 years ago, we had looked into it. And then actually, I think NMED issued a statement of basis, and we came up with a different remedy than what DOE had recommended. And then we withdrew that because public did not like our selection either. They did not like cap and cover, which DOE had recommended. And we had done some enhanced, I don't remember exactly what we did, but we enhanced the remedy. And then public came back and didn't like it. So listening to public, we withdrew the remedy. So right now, after that, now it's back on the table, and we'll be getting CME. It's on our Appendix B, And once we get that, and which is nice, they're involving you before they submit the CME to get everybody's input.
Great, thank you. Again, so right now is time for public comment. Do we have anyone who would like to make comments? Hearing none, we'll proceed. And if people could, again, get closer to your microphones and speak louder, because the people in the back of the room are having difficulty hearing us. So let's see, up next is Stephen.
Thank you, Elena. This is a general question, I guess, to both NMED and N3B. Has anyone generated a projection as to where the chromium plume would go, at what concentrations and over what period of time, assuming no further interventions at all?
I myself have not looked at the study. I'm getting ready to, Michael, do you know?
We have a study, as I mentioned in my earlier comments, where we asked N3B, Neptune is the subcontractor that does this modeling for us. We've run a model looking at 3, 6, 9, 12 months. But I don't have the model that we asked to run didn't look beyond that. Neelam, I'll leave it to you if you have any modeling or calculations on what happens if we leave it as it is.
No, NMED does not do modeling. We basically review what you submit, and we haven't really. We've had several meetings where we have listened to their presentation on their model, but NMED tends not to put too much faith in models. We like to have real hard data.
Understood.
And models are good, and they help guide the investigation. But we are basically waiting for these wells, which I mentioned, to get data from there, because I'm glad to hear R70 is showing decreased concentration, because R73 was supposed to be east of it to define the lateral extent. And so maybe we'll get an R73 replacement. It's not plug and abandoned yet. They've been having some issues in the field, the drillers. So once that's abandoned, we'll have a replacement well for R73. We'll have an idea how far to the east the plume has gone. And all these wells, unless until they'll end up drilling two, because OSC, Office of State Engineer, does not like, after R73 incident, they do not want double screen wells. So they want wells to be in the single screen. So there is no communication. So unless until we get that data, we really don't know. What we know, we do have some data, and we've made quite a bit of progress since 2018. I mean, the plume was discovered in 2005, but since 2018, NMED approved a couple of IM work plans. One was for the center of the plume characterization, and one was control, hydraulic control. And we basically don't believe the injection part, the hydraulic part is working, but we do believe the extraction part is working. And it is reducing whatever small amount of chromium it's being extracted, it's being treated, and it's being disposed of. So we would like DOE to continue with the extraction, but they have to have a path forward for the injection, and that's why we are asking them to come up with proposals to have alternate injection sites, so we can continue with the IM while we characterize this lateral and vertical extent, and then move on to remedy.
So in other words, though, there is no projection based upon existing hydrology of the aquifer as to where that plume might go over a long-term period of time? We don't have that data?
That's what they're working on.
No, sir, we do not have that data. I have a one-year projection that was finished, and they're pulling together the results of it, but there's no long projection, yet we've been directed to keep the wells off, and the wells will remain off unless the Department of Energy chooses to invoke its rights under the consent order for dispute resolution. But as I mentioned in previous meetings, until I have data that shows the plume is rebounding at a rate that I can't continue to try to negotiate and work with my regulator on it. In that case, I will consider some of the exercising rights under the consent order, because it's not a unilateral, it doesn't have to be unilateral direction. But it is so far, and until it becomes a crisis, like an analysis that shows that, it would not be conducive to the kind of relationship and that I'm trying to build with my regulator to go immediately into dispute resolution just because we have disagreements on what the technical data, the analysis, and the model is telling us.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is it seems to me that what we're trying to do is to prevent downstream harm. And until you get to a point where you can analyze what the impact would be downstream, there are other potential options you could be considering. For example, over time, it'll dilute anyway. And if you ran into a situation where you had a particular extraction well for Santa Fe's water supply, for example, you could treat it at that point. And that might be an alternative that should be considered, especially given the fact that no matter how many wells you drill out there, you're probably going to miss some of the plume anyway.
Mm-hmm. The drinking water supplies that are really at risk with this is the proximity of the boundary with the tribal nation. That's the real one. The eastern nose of the plume is quite a distance away from the Rio Grande. That's where the groundwater would emerge unless it found a natural spring somewhere in between. And let me just simplify that it would go all the way to the river. I had my folks do a calculation. It's something like 700 years at the groundwater speed. This is a real simplistic calculation before we would get to the Rio Grande. So our great ad infinity grandchildren would be impacted potentially if you consider getting the plume to the Rio Grande. It's really the boundary with Pueblo de San Ildefonso and Los Alamos County is concerned because of their proximity of PM3 to the plume, and we have 2 Sentinel wells there and other data that we're working to share with the county to help them understand our basis for concluding at this point the county's water supply is not threatened by the chromium plume.
But then it gets back, would it not, to a question of the trade-off between the cost of the program you're proposing versus the cost of treating that water as it was contaminated if it was?
I have absolutely no desire to allow the plume to migrate all the way down to where a drinking water supply would be and then treat it. And even if I was that delusional, I have absolutely no doubt that the regulator would not let me do that. So it's the options of how do we contain it and contain it safely and move into a remedy. And that's where the disagreements are. I am not contemplating under any scenario allowing the plume to move anywhere where it would go off landhold boundaries, because the underpinnings, as I've taken away in the discussions with the state, has been their concern about the injection is that it's damaging the aquifer. If I allowed the plume to just naturally move and just kept it from San Ildefonso's lands, I'm damaging the aquifer. I don't want damage to the aquifer going off landhold property or onto it. We have to treat it. And as Neelam said, it'll take, when we get I'm going to presume pump and treat is probably the most viable primary remedy. I'm not going to say it's a decision because I'll get ahead of NEPA and RCRA. But if that were to be the treatment option, pump and treat systems take decades to actually treat a plume this size. There's 2 plumes in the city of Espanola that not DHEC, that's my South Carolina, that New Mexico's Environment Department has been managing. And they've been running, I think, Neelam, when I listened to Deputy Secretary Roos present that to the legislature, 20 years, and there's still a large plume that has to be treated. It takes a lot of time, and although we released 160,000 pounds of chromium, the best estimates we have are about 15% of that probably made it down to the groundwater. We don't know what might be entrained in the Vado zone. Not all of it made it down there. A plume that large is not going to be completed when we get a remedy in place in 5 or 10 years. It's going to be a long-term treatment, and we have to make sure that the remedy that we put in place is there to catch the plume that we know of and anything upstream that we'll still have to explore and characterize after we get a remedy in place.
You were referring to damage to the aquifer. What kind of damage to the aquifer occurs other than chromium contamination?
That's the damage.
That is it?
Yes, that's the damage. Your background levels are anywhere from 3 to 7 parts per billion naturally. The plume ranges from, it's below 50, but 50 parts per billion is where we draw the plumes, up to the peak concentration of around I think it's 700 parts per billion at the centroid of the plume. And I don't want to let that dilute and spread out, smear between where it is and heaven knows to the east. That the environmental laws wouldn't let me do that.
Another complication is that because of this IAM, there's extraction, there's injection, we've changed groundwater in that area. The hydrology has changed. So it's kind of hard to now see the flow rates because it's being impacted by our operations. So it's not that simple right now to go calculate. But as we get more data, it'll make it easier to estimate.
If you assume that some part of the plume is going to escape, then what happens?
Well,
Since that seems likely.
That's kind of where we are with these lateral extent wells. We're having wells at southern boundary on the east because plume seems to be moving eastwards. So we can't Swiss cheese it, but that gives us a better idea. Right now we have these huge data gaps. Like we don't know, our CREX 5 we mentioned earlier was an extraction well number 5, which originally was drilled as an injection well, thinking it will be a boundary well. And it turned out when we drilled it, contamination was over 270.
The plume had passed you by.
Yeah, so it was not a boundary well. It was way within the thing. So we stepped out and we did our 70, as I said. So this plume surprises every time we get more data. So our 70 was drilled, and it turned out that the deeper screen had higher concentrations than the top screen, because initially when in 2015 we approved the work plans, assumption was that the contamination is in the top 50. Right. And right now we have data that shows that it's beyond that. So that's what we are trying to get handle on, is the vertical extent and the lateral extent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neelam. And thank you, Michael. I do have a quick question on this, and then we'll move on to Brad. Thank you for your patience. And I, too, have... Thank you again, as I speak loudly. Michael and Neelam, and we'll go to Brad, but I do have one quick question. How has the CAB's recommendation on the chromium plume added or impacted to the talks between NMED and EMLA? If that's okay to answer that, it's not really a consent order. So has it helped? Has it added? Has it impacted? Is it considered? Is it?
So I'll begin. Thank you. The strategy and the options that we have proposed are 100% in alignment with the recommendation of the CAB. One of the recommendations was proceed to a remedy. So yes, what the department is advocating and bringing represents what we're hearing from our advisory board. But as Neelam has indicated, at this point, the state it feels it's in their better interest to continue to study it rather than to move into a remedy, and that's where we have the professional disagreement. But what we've been proposing from the federal agency's perspective is 100% in alignment with the recommendation. We've been using it. It factored in and influenced what we were coming to the table with.
So
that's good to know.
I think Mike answered it. As far as NMED is concerned, as I said earlier, we need to have a little more information. We get to select the remedy.
Right.
And we are not at this point with this not insufficient data to select a remedy.
Yeah, and the recommendation itself did ask for more data to fill in the gaps for both of your benefit.
Yeah, and we agree that these 4 wells are not going to answer all the questions. But to me, vertical extent is very important, since we started with the assumption that it's top 50 feet, and now we already know the data is showing the contamination is much deeper. So we need to figure out where it is. And I don't know, we could select a remedy, and NMED can go through the process of issuing a statement of basis, but that is to be followed with implementation. Not having knowing the extent of contamination, how are we going to implement or plan a remedy? I can't visualize it. So that's where the disconnect is. You know, DOE thinks we could, because most probably the pump and treat is going to be the main component of it. So I see that we agree would be pump and treat. But at this point, when we select a remedy, it's supposed to be followed by CMI work plan right away. And that's supposed to have details on how you're going to do it. And I'm just hearing that one well, Simmer 3, which we are prioritizing, is not going to be done till next September. Where are we at a point that we can select a remedy when we can't even get these data gaps done?
Your question is maybe provoking a discussion between Neil and I, but as we've been having these summits, Neil, one of the things I've been looking at the EPA guidelines and guidance. When I read the EPA's guidance on the corrective measures implementation plan, it doesn't envision having the final design as part of the selection of the remedy is really technologies and approaches. Did I misunderstand the EPA's guidance that preliminary and final design is part of the implementation phase, not the remedy selection itself? Am I correct?
You're right there. But what I'm saying is if we were to approve a CME, we are not going to wait 6 years to start implementing it. CME is a step. You evaluate all the remedies, you recommend, we'll select one, then we go on to implementing the remedy. And without this information, I can't see us moving on to implementation, so we cannot select a remedy at this point. Okay.
Okay. I appreciate that conversation. It is a very complex site, and adaptive site management is something to consider. And I know you've both been considering it. So thank you for continuing to have talks on this and to negotiate.
We do have a meeting tomorrow on adaptive site management.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I do appreciate the continuing conversation between NMED and EMLA and how the CAB can support you toward this. Let us know.
Sure, thank you.
Now let's, Mark.
Thank you, Elena. I just wanted to thank both the EMED and DOE for talking in front of the CAB with this discourse. I have learned so much about the logic that goes behind it, the data that's necessary, the assumptions that are made, the hopes that we can reach a remedy agreement. This has been extremely beneficial. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
I appreciate that comment. I just want to add one more thing. I think I shared with the CAB when I first came here that it was a priority for me to build a stronger relationship with the public and my regulator. It's very easy to when we polarize or have disagreements on technical issues, for that to be destroying relationships. And I'll just say, I think it's a testimony of Neelam and Rick gave me a commitment to, and I'll say a loan of trust, not a commitment, to try to build that relationship. And while we have very strong feelings and professional opinions, the fact that we can have a dialogue like this civilly, without throwing pencils and papers and erasers at each other, I take that as a very positive thing. So I really appreciate you noting that and giving me an opportunity to note that. And I hope Neelam and Rick feel the same way.
Let me go. Here we go.
Okay, thank you. Pens aside.
I'm still whole. So
Projectiles, no projectiles in my meeting, our meeting. No, okay. Thank you. Brad, please, you're up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was interesting. And to follow up, I'm Brad Smith. The last time I was here, I was, as this says, Engineering Nuclear Safety Program Manager. I am now President of N3B, and glad to be here. So I'm going to start off with a simple statement. I'm a simple person. It takes a village. And We've had excellent feedback from Michael on the status of where we're at, as well as NMED. Rick, thank you. So I'm going to take a little different tack on where I want to discuss where N3B is going. We have Ike White here in town. I have utmost respect. I've known Ike on and off, and the sponsorship and support for things are always appreciated. Michael and Ellie, for what they're doing with us, this is a new horizon. You know, so people will talk about, well, what happened in the first 5 years? I look at that as a continuum of all projects that are here, whether they're operational in nature or you'll hear closure contracts. Well, N3B is actually in an interesting middle ground. We're really not closing, but we are trying to attain stability with certain environmental remediation and contact handle true programs that'll position us for where the lab can go in the future or where land use can go in the future. So in the environmental management program, the most important resource to me are my people. You can break it down into people, plant, paper. Like I said, I'm a simple person. And you can look at where N3B has come from. We came out of LANL. There was an ongoing mission. We have executed a lot of work in the base period. Now we find ourselves in option period 1. We've had a high degree of attrition. And some people use that as an excuse. Having been through my career over 40 years, not only in the Department of Energy, but also I've managed large projects all over the world that were environmentally related. And you start to find similarities. And the only similarity, when we talk about diversity, you always get the people side, or you can get into religions or whatever else. Diversity also to me means what's between people's ears. What people bring in thought is more important because I can provide the best tools. I can provide all the training. I can provide facilities that look wonderful. The real secret sauce to this is how we interact together. We are a symbiotic organism. Thank you to the CAB for being curious and coming from the community and asking questions, because this is a collective village on where we go. There are no absolutes. Things happen. We've heard about the different hazards that are sitting in these facilities. We have characterization, but unless I go back and really figure out what I'm dealing with, I cannot provide the service and the mission delivery to Michael or to you with any certainty. Which brings me back to my people. There has recently been an Oak Ridge Associated University's culture survey that some have been privy to. Michael, with my predecessors, Kim Lebeck and Joe Laguerre, commissioned this to see where are our gaps. You know, because when you leave places, sure, Triad can provide more money, or another, you know, oil and gas, they can go to WIP, whatever. But you sometimes have to take a step back and look in the mirror and say, you know, sometimes we fire our boss. And I look back through my career, and I didn't get to this spot because I was the best or brightest necessarily. I had opportunities. I had people who believed in me, and they wanted to make sure that if they gave me opportunities, what did I do with it? So mentoring, training, opportunity development is what's going to make N3B really, and future work here in environmental cleanup, continue to progress. Other DOE sites, other sites around the world, it's a blessing to actually get the youth to come in, because you get disadvantaged people that may or may not have had educational opportunities, but their raw intellect is there, their curiosity is there. And when you start dealing with people who are from an area and protecting and able to clean up something that is there, that means something, because that, I'll call it, people on the floor have heard righteous mission. This is, there's nothing better than being able to come to work and know you can make a difference. So it isn't just the people on the floor that we're focusing on right now. we have gotten feedback from our folks, and they've told us, hey, we don't see management in the field enough. We don't have opportunities. We don't have these things. Well, if I don't give them those things, then how do they know the regulations that NMED wants us to execute? How do we know the orders and the guidelines that DOE puts in our contract? So what we're doing, and I'll continue to provide updates, but in essence, we're really trying to live by the precept of integrated safety management where the workers on the floor are accountable and own their work. We provide support to what they need. So whether that means education, we've extended our boot camps for our nuclear operators and our RADCON techs. We've also allowed them to give us input into what sort of training do you want? Because this is a very diverse type of work we do. I'm getting people that come out of casino management, McDonald's, Jiffy Lube, and I'm also getting those that are coming out of the military. We've started tapping back into all of the military demobilization recruitment centers, and I have 58 resumes from people that go from commanders and generals all the way down to enlisted people that just came off the GI Bill. These are the types of people that put together make a really powerful, diverse group that can not only learn from those that are here that have experience at LANL, but have the cultural background because they are coming to work from one of the Pueblos or from Santa Fe or from somewhere else in New Mexico. And I honestly believe that we can compete with Triad, not so much in the way of money that they could offer, whatever else, but this gives people a tangible choice on what do you want to do with your career. And that this isn't a dead end, because people will say, well, you've only got 3 years, Brad. What does that mean? If you look at the successes at all the other EM sites, it is you train people to give them that next opportunity. Hopefully they stay here, and many do because this is home. One of the things that we talk about is safety first, safety always. Well, what does that mean? Everybody can go to work and everybody hears that. Safety means something different to everybody. But if I make it so that Mark is watching after Brad, because if I'm about ready to do something stupid, you go, Brad, you don't want to do that. I thank Mark for intervening and helping me understand that I might have done something that would have injured me. And what's worse, sometimes our injuries can have broader impacts. And it's training our people to know the difference, that you might not have appreciated where you were at, and they may have had different rules. But now here are our rules. Here's what we are expected to execute, not only for the taxpayer, but for the Department of Energy, NMED, and other stakeholders. We have the EPA. We have others that are sitting there. We have OSHA. So what we really want to do is get people sensitized to the work we're doing, because once I get them to know the why, now the how starts coming in, and that attention to detail. So when we did the first corrugated metal pipe cut on June 29th, we had EMLA out there with us. We had others, because this was a proud day. You want to talk about a group of people in a buzz? We went from where it was flat. People were defeated. We had people, so retention bonuses. We had 57 different people that we wanted to give retention bonuses to ensure for the next year we would have their services. And we're talking floor level folks to first line supervisors. 22 accepted. Think about that number.
Just for the record, he said, talk about a buzz. I can assure you none of my workers in the field were buzzed. He's talking about a happy and joyous feeling. I just, since there's members of the public, nobody was buzzed. A little humor and levity. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Brad.
You can tell we have no relationship. So, but this is important. Laughter and the ability to share in success means something, because all of my workers are out with you. They need to take pride in what they do. Look at your faces, you're going, CMP cut, how much better is it getting that? Well, I'll tell you what, Jeff Avery came out last week, EM2, and when he watched what they were doing, he said, this is different. There is something tangible here that is different. The day after the cut, June 30th, 55 of the 57 signed up for the retention bonus. So collective leadership, the village, matters. Your view of the people that work here matter. They want to take pride in what they do. That's all we're about. So going forward, I'm going to stop the sermon and all that, but I am so proud of what we have done. So thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Brad. That is excellent. And having pride in your work and pride of place, and to give that to your people, to make that available to your people to grow together, that is leadership, and that is servant leadership. And I'm so glad to hear that. And having the retention it is, and you're not just providing them a job, you're providing them knowledge and a path forward and expertise. And hopefully we can reach out to more of our marginalized people and communities and know that they have options, that there are options for them. We're not here to save anyone, we're here to, it's not a handout, it's a hand up.
Exactly right. So job fairs, when you see them, just think of my little bald head. I'm teasing myself, but like I said, we all know that you want to be part of a winning team. And once that success starts, they will go out and they will have the conversations. And one of the things I've asked my comms team that we're going to start doing is literally, so we're going to have little success stories. So I've started a little video, but everyone's like, oh, well, the head people always get the videos. No. I started in the union. For a lot of circumstances it started, so how I'm here is, interesting. But knowing that those on the floor have a story to tell, and once they talk about their story, all of a sudden it flips from being what I can't do to what can I do? And that's what we're selling. So the next 3 years, hopefully I'm sitting here in front of you all and we're going, look at the great things we have done. You have recommendations you're going to provide. EMLA is working with us on what we do each year, but also forward planning to be able to get subject matter experts that we have in here that have dialogue with everybody. They take pride in that. And one of the other things that we are making sure is that no matter where you sit in N3B, you collectively, the we, will sit and have an impact on the person putting their hands on the stuff in the field. So it doesn't matter if I'm an engineer, I'm an industrial hygienist, I'm a procurement person, or a janitor. I am enabling. So remember the old NASA thing, and they asked the janitor, what's your job here? I'm helping us get to the moon. That's it.
Thank you. That's excellent. I don't know if I can follow up with that. I did have a follow-up, but you just. Yeah. So, do we have any questions or comments for Brad? Jim?
I know I've used up all my time, but thank you, Brad, for what you just said. This would be a time when I would say, let's go around the table and ask everybody how they feel about what happened today. So that's up to you.
Well, that is in the agenda, so thank you.
But I would like to add just a couple of thoughts here. I think context is really important. And I think we've gone over a ledge here, which is really terrific. The context is not about all the technical stuff, I don't think. It's how we all work together and get together. And so I'd like to just offer a couple of more ideas about context as we go forward in our meetings. And I'll just make the comments. Don't take any of these per se, but Elena got an award last month for a presentation she made last November to you guys. And I would like to ask her to make that presentation to us. She told me she thought we had it. I apparently was asleep last November. But I have it here, and down the road, I would like to have you do that if you would be willing, because I think it fits right with what we're talking about here. So don't comment.
Thank you,
You're
Jim,
going
for
to do
that.
it anyway, aren't you?
Yeah.
The other thing, contextually, I think we ought to be open to other outsiders coming and spending time with us. One I've heard about, and I haven't heard, is a guy by the name of Alan Carr, who can talk a lot of history about what has happened around here. And I understand he's terrific if you get him cornered. But more examples of this kind of thing, again, where we not only hear the technical sides of the issues that you guys are faced with, but we also continue to put it in context with what's happening in our world. And I think everybody around this table that I know has a story to tell. I think stories are the most important thing we can share. So that's how I'd end it with my participation today. I want to tell you all, this has been a great day. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jim. So, yes, if we're ready, we can go around the room. Roger?
Well, I'll just make this as part of my CAB comments, but in every thing you do in life, you learn new things from different people. And one of the things that I have learned, and I think is pretty important, when you have an emergency, the mental approach is just get in there like a bunch of bees and get the job done. But the thing that I've learned over the years is when you rush into things that may be considered an emergency, sometimes you get tunnel vision. And the tunnel vision is where a lot of things go wrong and a lot of people sometimes get hurt. So having some kind of a collaborative approach to getting work done and thinking things through before you do them, I think, is an important aspect to any job that needs to be done, whether it's an emergency or a long-term project. So I just thought I'd offer that as something that, it's easy to get yourself focused, and like Bradley made the comment, I've been in an environment where I saw people doing things that were unsafe. One of the guys that I was in this project with said, well, sometimes you can be too safe. And I thought, well, we have guidelines and procedures on how to do this job. And if you're not following those guidelines and procedures, there's a good chance somebody's going to get hurt. And in my work environment, I've had people probably talk about me or around me or behind my back. But I told him if somebody's going to talk about me, I'd rather have them say I care about you and me going home to my family. So I think it's an important aspect. All this cleanup needs to get done, but it needs to be done safely. So that's just my comment.
Thank you, Roger. Excellent. I agree 100%. Stephen, would you like to go next?
Yes, two things. I'd like to echo Jim's comments about context, because I think that's critically important, and I think this was a particularly effective day. And I wanted to thank Rick and Neelam and Brad and Michael especially for their courtesies in allowing us to dig into things and try to understand sort of what goes on and why the answers are what they are as they are today, and as things shift as we learn more data, of course. But that's something we really appreciate, and thank you all.
Okay, just briefly, I just feel a lot of appreciation for being here in person, and I started during the pandemic, and it just didn't feel this way during the pandemic, and so it feels good. Really appreciate both Neelam, Rick, Ike, Sarah, Michael, Brad. I think the in-person and listening, and I hope it helps you all just to kind of talk about this stuff out loud publicly. I think I'm hoping it helps you all tell your story and work with your staff as well. So just a lot of appreciation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Yes, exactly. And Stephen, thank you for your comments. I just briefly, I wanted to say thank you to Rick and Neelam for being here and for providing your expertise and your cooperation and willingness to answer the difficult questions, and that we're going to continue to work together and collaborate as we do build this community. We all do have our parts to play, but as Bradley said, we are a symbiotic organism. So thank you both so much. They have to leave early. Thanks. Okay, Mark.
Thank you, Elena. This was, for me, again, a particularly exciting, energetic discourse that I was really hoping the CAB would be all about since day one. It's arrived. I'm very happy about that. And moreover, I think it's given some legitimacy by having Ike White here. Thank you for whoever put the buzz in his ear to say, come on down, because he faced some pretty hard questions today. But I just feel good about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Pardon? Oh, okay, sorry. Beverly?
I don't have that much to say. I just really, really appreciate the fact that we had NMED, DOE, 3B, somebody from headquarters or Washington, all at the same table, and all of us at the same table. I mean, to me, that's incredible. I think we are making really good progress. I'd like to see us do more. I'd like to see the CAB take on more responsibility for recommendations and good discussions. Really, really also happy how it went today.
Great. Thank you, Beverly. Jim? Are you sure? Okay, we can come back to you. Marty?
Sure, thank you. As much as coming out of academic science, I love the beautiful presentations we get on the data and the science. This was phenomenal. I agree with Mark. This is what I was hoping this would be. And to hear the discussion of MDAH that we got and the chromium plume that you guys went through, I think has given me a much deeper understanding of where you guys are with this and where we can be of help in formulating our recommendations. So thank you, guys. This was a great day.
Thank you, Marty, and we're glad you're here. Patricio?
I did want to say this is a really good meeting today. It's different considering we had a roundtable discussion instead of a presentation. I really like the dialogue between us all, especially between the CAB and our upper management. It was really nice, and I enjoyed the conversations, especially between EMLA and New Mexico Environmental Department. I also appreciate Dave's comments on the shafts. That was really good, great information, and I'm looking forward to some more great dialogues like this, more roundtable discussions. I feel like we get a lot of that, as well as the community does as well. Thank you all.
Thank you, Patricio. Exactly. The more we speak out here, the more the community is informed, and that's what we want. Okay, let's go to online. Manny?
Just a quick well done and thank everybody.
Thank you, Manny. Is Melissa online? There she is.
Mm-hmm.
We'll give you a moment, Melissa. Joseph? Okay, and Manice has something for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to first congratulate our new officers taking over October 1st. Congratulations to both of you, Elena and Patricia. Thank you very much for your time. I also would like to remind you to turn in your mileage reimbursements to us, please. Get them to Bridget and I. And to remind you of your August 23rd virtual meeting, that's from 9 to noon. You'll be considering this recommendation on MDAH that you discussed today. So please try to put that in on your calendars and try to log in so that we can get that taken care of. Also, September 20th is our next regular meeting in Taos. That may be an overnight stay for some of you if you are over 50 miles from Taos. Let us know and we will take care of that. And then we have the chairs meeting in Oak Ridge, the week of October 2nd. So we've got a busy fall ahead, not to mention the WHIP tour, November 6th and 7th. So please remember to put all those dates in, especially for the WHIP tour. If you haven't let me know, please let me know as soon as possible. And I thank you very much. Good job. And thanks so much, Ellie, Michael.
Yes,
and this wonderful lady here.
Bridget, is there anything you'd like to add? No? Okay. So thank you all, and I look forward to working with Patricio as vice chair. I want to thank Jim and Mark. You guys will definitely, I can see you rising through the ranks. But we all have so many excellent people on the CAB that I think we'll all just take turns being on the executive committee. And I appreciate all of your comments and all of you being here today, and all of our members who are online, and the public who has joined us. And as far as MDAH goes, if you have comments, please send those to me and to the Risk Evaluation and Management Subcommittee, and we will synthesize those and we will get that recommendation working. Like I said, we are in the draft phase, so we are in regular communication. And then also, don't forget the Public Outreach Subcommittee as far as the website goes. Take a look at the beta page I sent to all of you on June 27th, and I will send it again. And take a look and send comments to Bridget, and she will consider your comments and send those off to the web design team, because we're so close to getting a new website. And I want to thank Michael for making this happen. Really, you make us look better.
It takes a village.
It does take a village. Thank you all very much. Ellie, I turn it over to you.
Before I close, I want to thank you all as well, not only for the time commitment to be here today. Many of you had to take leave from your jobs just to support this, and you're not getting paid, so that's recognized and very valuable. But beyond that, there's a lot of extra reading material and extracurricular effort that goes into this CAB as well. And that is also noticed and greatly appreciated. So the amount of time you put into your recommendations and conveying your thoughts is not only appreciated, but I hope you can see that it is valued, because we take that back and integrate it into what we're doing. I hope that is obvious to you. So I want to extend that thank you. And with that, I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Hit it, Carter. There you go.
Big whack.